Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing great today and enjoyed these stories. Make sure you check out my Patreon if you want to support my channel or get early access to my stories in the link below. And make sure you check out my podcast, which is also in the link below too. I have a quick message before the stories start today, so I'd like to share this. I think for anybody who's struggling with their mental health and is in the process of working through it or about to, or whatever stage you're at with it, remember that when you're doing the things to get better, it's very important to be consistent. Not every day is going to be perfect necessarily, so what's important is that you just remember that this is a part of the journey, and consistency is what will prove true in time and will help you get better with things. Even for myself, I have days where I just don't feel great at all, and things don't seem to be going my way, but I just remind myself of the importance of being consistent. So hopefully that can help some people out there. And remember that whatever you're going through, you're not alone. And there are people out here just like you who understand, or like me who understands. So I hope you're all doing great. And let me know what you did for Christmas too. I hope you're all well, and I'll speak to you all soon. Take care. The area that I grew up in is the one where I work now. It's always cold where I live. It feels like it's constantly dark and gloomy. I mean, honestly, I don't ever think we really come out of winter. It had some perks though. Visibility could be good sometimes. That's if it wasn't too foggy. Especially in the winter time, I kind of like the yellowy glow on the floor from the different leaves that would go down there. The only problem was you were constantly damp, and that could be quite frustrating at times. I work as one of the forest rangers. I'd done it for a little while, and I didn't think there was much a job could throw at me. I'd worked other jobs before, like mining specifically, which I found really difficult. I found it easy to lose your mind down there, going hours and hours without getting any daylight. It's just not good for you. Now, one thing I did notice though when I started this line of work is just how quiet it is. Sometimes it could be a good thing to be out there alone, but sometimes it really wasn't. That was probably the hardest thing to me to get adjusted to, and also how dark the forests are. I mean, even in daytime, where it was always raining, you couldn't always see as far as you'd like to, but the trees were lifeless, mostly, or at least in the winter. You'd even see some dead ones thrown about on the ground, which the storm had kicked up. There was all different kinds of rumours about what had happened out here. There was something that I realised while I was surveying though. I heard a gunshot. Now, this was one single gunshot, but it sounded like a rifle. The thing is, I only connected the dots after it had happened, but I felt something just brush past me. I didn't hear a sound, but there was a click in a tree, then the gunshot sound. Then it became apparent someone was shooting shots near me. I screamed out, hey, what on earth are you doing? And started swearing, thinking it was a hunter. I screamed, you could have killed me. And I then ducked down for a second, trying to figure out where they are. I'm trying my best to do some kind of scouting, but I don't really know what I'm doing. I think because of the direction that I believe the bullets come from, that I'm in good cover here and I shouldn't be seen. The problem is, I've got to get moving to safer grounds now. I look around and I really can't hear anything, and I actually wonder if it was something else. Maybe it was something explosive. Maybe somebody was trying to take the trees down illegally and it was a bit of shrapnel that come off. Seems like it was a good thing if that was the case, because at least nobody was trying to kill me or hunting and just doesn't know how to aim their gun. So I ended up walking normally after this realization. I'm now walking towards an area which has some good lighting, so I know that I'm going to be relatively safe if I follow this path. But I couldn't shake the feeling that was definitely strange. Anyway, I've still got a few more checks to do. To be honest, this is actually the easiest part of the job, where that I well and truly don't actually have to do much. I mean, literally, I'm just walking around. The pay was alright, but it wasn't the best, and it was actually quite frustrating, to be honest. I mean, the job wasn't too difficult, but I just felt tired every day. It's honestly like I come home from work and I just have to lay there for a while just to recover. I think it's from being on my feet so often out there, and I think being cold often takes its toll on you in other ways. I'd send out so many job applications, but because I didn't have a high education, I had a really hard time getting opportunities, which really wasn't the best. I mean, come on. I knew how good I was, and I knew the jobs before that had been quite challenging, so I definitely had skills there, but nobody seemed to be giving me an opportunity for anything. But what could I do about it? I just had to keep going with it all, I guess, but it definitely wasn't a nice feeling. It meant too that I had another night job where I would wait tables at a restaurant in a small cafe. I didn't have an issue with it, but I kind of felt a little bit degrading. At least when I was at this job walking around, I could just reflect on things and I kind of felt like I had a higher purpose. But beggars can't be choosers, and that was what I was doing. This was often on my mind out there, to be honest. I think where we rarely spoke to people on the job, I mean, you would just have all day to just get in your head and just think and think and think and think. I resorted to singing eventually, and I started doing it again now. You know, the crazy part is I didn't always realise that I was. I would basically catch myself singing songs. I'd kind of make them up as well because I didn't know most of the lyrics honestly other than the main chorus. There was one other guy that I worked with, but I mean literally just the one. So we'd very rarely encounter each other out here. In fact, it was designed not to happen, because obviously if we're both bumping into each other then we're not really patrolling correctly, but that was fine. I like to follow the train tracks sometimes. I'm not quite sure why, to be honest. I mean, the trains would come here, but so rarely. At first it looked pretty cool to see their glowing light in the night, but it also become kind of a common thing, almost like a very quiet part of the scenery, only loud when it's directly in front of you. I used to love staring down the train tracks and just looking out into what I thought was the abyss, just imagining a better future for myself. The good thing is, there's been no more shots at this point, so it's safe to presume that it was something alright, but nothing too dangerous. I decide that I'm going to report it when I get back, but now I have more surveying to do. So off I go. I keep doing my surveying, and everything's basically normal, and I then find myself finishing this job, and I have to hustle over to my other one, which I didn't want to do that much. But at least I'm going to be in the warm with this job. So I get in there, and it's a real quiet night. There's basically one lone cop sitting at another table, drinking coffee by himself, just kind of staring at it and looking. I'm not sure exactly what he's doing. He's basically just sat there kind of staring around. He was in the corner, so I guess that he did this intentionally so he could see if anybody else was around or up to trouble, but I thought, come on man, we're in the quietest part of town, there's nothing going on. I go to ask if he wants anything else, but he doesn't say anything. He just kind of looked at me. That's odd, I thought, as I decide that I'm just going to stick to myself. Usually I like to make conversation with people in here, not just for the sake of being nice, but just to have something to do. I mean, really, my god, I would get bored out here sometimes. But he doesn't say nothing to me. He just kind of keeps an eye on me. I then realise he's kind of looking through me, and he hasn't drank his coffee. I come over and offer to refill it, sticking my hand out so he knows that I'm ready to take the cup for him, but he doesn't say anything. I then sit down next to him and say, "What's wrong? You need to talk?" He then finally breaks his stare and looks up and says, "You don't want to know, buddy." I say, "What's wrong?" Again, he doesn't say too much of anything, and I just go about doing my other duties. I'm having a good clean up and stuff, and I eventually go back to him. Not quite sure why, I just felt like he had something he needed to tell someone. I mean, just anyone. So I sit down next to him and refill his cup. making it hot, and then I pour one for myself. I say, what happened? He says, you know, there's someone out here and it's just crazy. The whole case is blowing my mind. I decided it's best not to ask questions because obviously he's not going to be able to say everything, but he just keeps on shaking his head at me. I say, come on, you'll be fine. Just put out some flyers and the whole town will be after him. What happened? He then says that, well, we think there's a killer out there. People are dropping dead every so often and we just can't figure out why it's happening. This has been going on for years out here, but the last one was crazy. It was so brutal, it kind of made me not want to do this anymore. I just nodded and didn't do anything else. I knew that he probably just needed somebody to hear. Those guys have a really tough job, of which I have the absolute utmost respect for. So now anyway, I just pack up everything and tell him that we're closing soon, and he says thank you and tips me and leaves. As I'm watching that cop car pull away, I can't help but think to myself that there's definitely something up. I've never seen a cop so shaken up before, and it kinda scared me. It makes me think of the shot that happened earlier, but I think, you know what, there's no way that guy was hunting me. There's no way anybody's out there, it's just me going crazy. Who was it? Was it even a guy? I don't know. I don't really care too much. So I go back to bed that night and I'm really struggling to fall asleep. I have this problem quite often, to be honest, where that I kind of just lay there and it's like I feel tired at all the wrong times and I could sleep when I've just woken up, but not at night. My bed becomes by far the most comfortable thing in this whole world when I need to get up and do things. But when it's time to lay there and do nothing, it seems like I cannot break out of it. I'm really not sure why. But anyway, this is happening and every so often I hear a tappy type sound. Kind of sounds metallic, but kind of not. It was creepy, man, I'm telling you. I turned down the TV and I could kind of hear it in the background a little bit. Though it seems to pick up static more like a radio. I'm stood there in my kitchen trying to figure out what's happening and I decide to quickly grab a weapon. I go to grab a knife but accidentally pick up a fork. It kind of broke my concentration as I smile to myself, then grab a knife. I go around room from room turning on all of the lights, convinced that I'm going to find someone there, but there's nothing. I actually scared the life out of myself with my own reflection and I kind of stabbed out at nothing. My hand's trembling a bit and I tell myself to calm down. I'm pretty sure that if anybody is in here, whoever it is, I'm going to react quickest and end up hurting someone that might just be, I don't know, God knows. I could even be hurting myself and that's not a good idea. So I finish my patrol and end up upstairs and I have a quick look into the backyard. There's been some animals coming through and I think, well, you know what, it's probably just one of them. I shouldn't have to worry too much. I've just got to be brave now. So anyway, I decided to leave the TV on this time just to make it sound like I'm in another room in case anybody else is there. I put the knife down very carefully, placing it away from myself as I return back to my bed. Good night, world, I say to myself, and I kind of blacked out. I think maybe because of the emotions of it and the fear and my heart racing, it meant that my body needed a little bit of time to just knock itself out to recover. I think that happens often with myself. So I wake up anyway, making my morning coffee, and I feel pretty good about everything. Maybe it was a good sleep, but something really kickstarts me to be in a good mood, and I just can't stop smiling. So I grab my paper and everything, and I head to my car. I reach around for the keys, and I notice something strange. There's something etched on the side of my car, of which I can't figure out exactly what it is. I then go for a closer look, and I can see my name wrote in something. I don't know what it is. It was dark and sticky, but I think, come on, the kids, what's wrong with them? I know we live in a boring place, but you've got to have better things to do than this. I mean, what kind of childhood have they got? Gosh. as I go to wipe it off, but decide not to because I don't want to ruin my clothes and I don't have any kind of handkerchief or tissue on me. So now instead, I just jump in the car and start driving to work. The drive's pretty good, but my mood was dampened a little bit from my bright and sunny one at the time that I'd woken up, and I can see some of the mountainy type hill things as the rocks come into view as I get closer to the parking area. And I'm the only car there. As expected, nobody comes here at this time of year. I'm in for yet another boring shift. So off I go, out into my job that I loved so much, but couldn't wait to leave in some ways. One of these days I'm going to get a job that I actually deserve, and I can't wait for it to come, I think to myself. I decide to walk near the stream now, and just take a while to watch the rain fall. These beautiful droplets bouncing on the water look so pretty. It's something that doesn't actually leave my mind for a while. I think, you know what, it's not all that bad here, and my optimism seems to be coming back to me. I guess my mood was coming and going in waves now, so I didn't judge it too much. So I start doing my rounds, yes, the lovely morning rounds that I dread so much, where I know everything's going to be exactly the same as the day before. So I'm walking along with my umbrella, and I'm basically pushing some of the low-hanging branches out of the way. I can't be bothered to move or duck down under them, when I suddenly hear something. It sounds like sprinting. It sounds like it's really close to me, and I turn around quickly to see who it is. I jump behind myself, and no one's there. Now that was creepy. It literally sounded like somebody sprinting past me. I don't know what it could have been. I then turn to my left and I can see somebody running, clearly injured, up ahead of me. It must be another person. I then hear one of the most nasty screams I've heard before. It sounded like an animal about to die, it really did. I see them run off for a while until they duck down, and bang, I hear it. Another shot. I immediately drop to the ground. I don't know why, I honestly become like a military commando as I take cover and shelter. I decide to bury myself a little bit on some of the foliage under me as I stay still and quiet. Who was that? What on earth is happening? I'm inquisitive, naturally, but I know the best thing to do now is just to not move. So I lay there as still as I possibly can, trying to make sense of this and what's going on surrounding me. Now, I look up slowly, and I can hear more screaming, which immediately makes me duck down again. Have you ever been hiding somewhere and you can hear a door open? I mean, even if you're just playing like hide and seek or something. Well, it was just like that fear. Oh no, they found me. And I immediately ducked down, burying my face a bit. It probably was quite hard to see me, but I wasn't so sure, so I decided to stay as still as I possibly can, like a tortoise or something. And then, bang, silence. The echoes of the round off of the rocks are really not nice. It's burned into my brain. It's like something that will not stop playing. My ears are actually ringing a little bit. I'm not sure how close whoever that is, but they must be incredibly close to me. What on earth is happening? I start shaking and really struggle to stay calm. Now I'm waiting to hear a follow-up, but nothing happens. God, I'm gonna be next, I think. Well, I stay down for 5 minutes and nothing happens. I can hear someone moving around now, and it's really putting me off being there. Every so often, I can hear something encroaching in the leaves around me. It gets closer and closer, then eventually drifts off further and further, leaving me in a state of paralysis, unable to move, watching a nightmare unfold in front of me. Now, after a while, I realise that not much is happening, but I just can't move. I'm absolutely frozen to the spot. Somebody must have died right in front of me. That cop, he wasn't lying. I don't want to be that guy's next story in a calf, so I just wait there for longer. After a little while, I have to raise my head up because of being cold, and I kind of wiggle around a little bit very slowly. I realise that, God, it's got dark, really quick. I had my eyes sealed shut so strong that it actually made my eyes hurt when I regained my focus. It actually took me a while to focus on my surroundings. I must have done something to my eyes. I slowly lift my head up and peek around, and I can't see anything or anyone. It's just really dark out here, and I'm very cold. I know now that if I don't get moving, hypothermia might get me, so I have to move. So I slowly get up, crouching. I'm adopting kind of like a crab walk or something, as I slowly make my way up and scan around. I can't see anything. I'm expecting to see movement or something out here in the wilderness with me. A body? Multiple bodies. Witnesses, who knows, just anything. But nothing. So I then get up and start making my way in the straightest beeline which I can possibly make to the relative safety of where the lights are. But I don't know who's out here. I don't know if I'm going the right way truly, because I've not been out here like this before. I honestly felt like this can't be real. I just keep saying in my head over and over again that this cannot be real, this cannot be real. I just can't stop saying it, almost like a mantra. So I get further and further away. Eventually I pass the same stream that I'd gone along earlier, and I know that I'm not too far from getting back. I eventually make it back to the parking lot, and nobody's there. My car's there, but not much else. I'm really shaken, and I quickly get into my car. I don't even care that I've left our place completely open, and the keys are in my pocket. I just know I'm getting out of there. I start up the car, and really drive quickly. I actually kind of got stuck for a second, but I was probably in such a panic that I didn't realise I could just put it into drive and I'd get out of there. After about a minute I do so. I drive a bit crazily, kind of swerving, but eventually my nerves settle enough that I'm able to drive over to the local police station. Now the crazy thing is, I get there, it's the same cop that I saw the other day in the calf. He takes one look at me and says, "Come in." He looks like he's very tired, like he hasn't slept for a while. He then says, "Can you show me where it was?" After I spoke to him, describing what happened. I agree, and there's two other cops that come with me. I'm riding in the back of their car, too shaken to drive now, and I thought, you know what, is this even safe? Are three of us going to be safe out there? I start telling them this and my worries. They say, "Don't worry, we're armed." I say, "But no, you gotta be kidding me, you don't know how many are actually there." They then offer for me to stay in the car while they go out to investigate, and I say, "Yeah, that's fine." I don't know why I felt so safe in the back of that. Anybody with a gun could have just come and taken me, but I wasn't really thinking too much. I sit there and I realise just how dark it is, and it was still a bit cold in the car. They've left one of their doors slightly open, like not all the way, but you know when the lock hasn't engaged fully. But I just don't want to go out there and open it. I was really that scared. I keep going over the whole situation in my mind over and over again, thinking, gosh, what has happened? What on earth just happened? Why did this have to happen to me? And I start thinking, this is why I need to change jobs. This is why I need to get out of here. But eventually, the darkness somehow settled me a bit, and I wait. I actually fell asleep for a while, until a knock on the window wakes me up again. He says, "Yeah, you're right, we got him." I say, "Wow, where is he? What happened?" He says, No, look." I then come out of the car and they say, "Right over there, we found a decomposing body." I say, "What do you mean?" Apparently, just exactly where I heard the shot, there was a body which was probably 2 or so weeks old, maybe even more, out there. I say, "It's not possible, I heard it happen today. Are you sure there's not more?" They say, "We're pretty certain, but we're gonna get forensics off this. We're gonna find the guy doing this." They then thank me for all of the information on this, and they say just to leave it with them. They drove me back to my home, and I remember when I got back, I just couldn't take it. I've still got my car with me because that's what they drove me back in, and I drove for probably another 7 hours until I eventually reached my brother's home. I get there and tell him everything that happened in a state of deliriousness, fatigue, and just emotional exhaustion overall. He says that I can stay with him for however long that I need, and I did for a good while. It turned out that it became a cold case and they never actually solved it. But I ended up having to relocate everything. I just couldn't handle it. It was too horrifying. I still don't know what happened to this day. Turns out that was the only body they found there too. I don't know what I walked into, but I still have the nightmares about it and wake up screaming. So this happened about 7 years ago. I was around 19 to 20 at the time and a scout leader. We had a camp in the forest. The nearest city was about 10 to 15 minutes away by car. Every year in July, we would have an international scout camp. Scouts from different countries would come to join us. I was in the preparations team, and we would go around every 2 or 3 weeks in advance to basically clean up and just get everything ready. The preparation team had about 20 people, about 10 to 12 as men, and the rest are women who are all in our late teens or early 20s. So if anybody's been a scout, they might know that the first thing in camp is setting up a flag. The flag is important in the camping game. Other scouts were constantly trying to steal the flag. If they managed to steal the flag, the lost team would have to go home. This actually never happened. No one was ever sent home. It was just a role to keep other members involved and wanting to protect the flag. Therefore, we had to constantly keep guard on it, or at least be by it. Other games involved other teams kidnapping members. All fun and games, nothing violent or harsh. It was meant to be fun but keep us alert all the time. So this is where the story begins. One night our preparation team was done with everything. The other 2 countries from Europe, about 60 people, were set to arrive in the morning. We had nothing to do, so we set up a campfire and started talking and singing. We had our guards, people from the team, set up in different locations, 2 near the flag and 2 near the entrance and 2 in the woods facing the river. So we tried and decided not to go to sleep initially. But then we decided to change the guards every 2 hours. Every guard has a whistle. If an animal or person was close to the camp, they would blow the whistle as an alarm to the danger. That night, I was an hour into sleep when I heard the whistle. We all woke up and ran to the team member who had whistled. She claimed that she saw 3 white figures running fast in the forest near the setup tents. We thought that in the morning, the teams were arriving and were being creepy, or just trying to sneak around to kidnap somebody or get the flag. So we all decided to stay awake but go into defense mode. We each stand guard in different locations, watching for any signs. After some time, we started hearing whistles from the deeper parts of the forest. We also started hearing what sounds like radios from different places. We saw some guys in white shirts running around the forest. Me and 2 other people decided to check the empty tents to see if there were people hiding in there, but we can't find anyone. We then start walking around and we heard laughter from a bush nearby. It sounded like a woman laughing, so we started laughing too as we thought we had heard the other scout team. Naturally, we walked to the bush without hesitation, though there was nobody there. Then we heard noises from another bush that was a little bit deeper in the woods. Then we heard a clear conversation from a few people speaking in a French accent. We could hear them so clearly that we checked but saw nothing. Then we saw a guy in a white t-shirt running fast again in front of us, but his speed was weird. He was running so fast it's as though he's sliding. Keep in mind we're in the woods at night with no lights. There's no way somebody can run like this without making a sound. Now somehow, the guy was running so quiet. It literally seemed like he was gliding. Again, we didn't feel threatened, We just had an adrenaline rush, but it was more excitement to catch them than anything else. After all, we just wanted to have fun. We were excited to see the teams again and have fun. For the next 2 or so hours, we kept hearing whistling and whispers in French, but we couldn't find a single person. It was so clear that there were a lot of people hiding around us, but we couldn't catch even one of them. The important thing to mention is that the arriving teams were not from France, so that was weird. Anyway, after 2 hours of running in the forest, I got tired. I didn't take this too seriously, so myself and a couple of friends went back to our tents. I laid down, and after 10 minutes saw a car light speeding towards us. The area is not designed for regular cars to arrive. None of us actually had cars there. A bus from the near city would drop us off and pick us up there when the camp was over. We had a car coming straight towards our tents with a high beam on. It was coming so fast that we were frozen expecting it to actually hit us. It happened so quick that we can't even run. Then, suddenly it just stopped right near our tent. We heard the door open and no footsteps. Whoever it was just closes the door and left. We were shaken at that moment, and it hit me that it couldn't have been anyone from the other teams. Now, we got out and learned that our teammates also had seen a jeep speeding towards our tent. We can't see anyone coming out of the car. After this, we decided to just stay awake until the morning. Throughout the entire night, we kept seeing these white-shirted men sliding around us. We couldn't see any faces, they were so fast and weird. We could hear loud laughter and whispers in French all around the camp. We could tell that there were a lot of strangers near the camp who were either messing around or trying to hurt us. The sun eventually came up, and the strange thing stopped. We didn't manage to catch who it was or figure out why they were there or what they were doing, and in the morning the teams arrived. We had this leaderboard meeting every afternoon where we would discuss daily plans and meals. Also, we would share anything that was interesting. When all of the team leaders arrived in the morning, they didn't even realize what had happened to us the night before. Up to this day, I really have no idea who it was. I really have no idea who they were or exactly what their plans were. This occurred when I was about 15 or 16. I was also with a friend of about the same age and his dad. We were exploring the woods behind our houses. We lived in the same neighborhood. We went back into these woods many times to hike around and play paintball. One day though, we decided to go a little deeper in the woods just to check it out. A little background is that this is an old forest growth / protected wetlands area with a few square miles that are surrounded by roads on all 4 sides located in the northeast United States. For a while, we were wandering along. It was mid/late spring, so the forest is pretty lush and green, when one of us sees a small patch of white coming through the woods. I mean, it stood out quite easily in contrast to the green leaves, so we decided to investigate, and the 3 of us headed off in directions towards this mysterious white spot coming through the leaves. If you've ever walked through dense woods, you'll know how difficult it is to go in a straight line because of fallen logs and brush. Anyway, we keep walking towards this object for what seems like a while. But this object still hasn't come into focus. It looks like it's a white blob, and it's just getting further and further away from where we spotted it. We didn't think too much of it at this point, or at least I didn't, and continued walking in the direction of this thing. It must have happened 2 or 3 times that we'd walk towards this thing for a few minutes, stop and notice that we aren't getting any closer. Now by this point, I think there was a little tension building, but nothing out of the ordinary. At some point though, as we're getting closer, we do notice the object is starting to fill out. We can clearly see now that it's a tiny white house on a hill. I'd say the structure was about the size of a shed you might keep your lawnmower in. We were excited because how often do you come across something like that? It's still a little ways away, but again, very obvious that this little white house is what we had seen and were walking towards. So we continue towards the little house, and we lose sight of it momentarily as we go up over another hill, but as soon as we come to the top of the hill, the house is gone. Now we're really confused and both look at each other but keep walking up the hill that we've seen the house on. This last part happened pretty quickly. We get to the top of the hill, still looking at the other hills close by to see if maybe we just turn around or something and we'd see the little house, until one of us noticed an old foundation at the grounds where there obviously a house had once been. The shape of the foundation was exactly the size of this mysterious vanishing white house. I barely had time to notice the foundation when all three of us heard a growl, which sounds like it's getting louder until it's almost as loud as a chainsaw. Nothing was said, but the three of us, including my dad's friends, all sprint out of the woods in the direction that we've come. I don't recall ever discussing what happened to the two other friends I was with that day. Since this happened, I tried looking on Google Maps for some kind of indication that the house was there, but it's just a forest which is too thick. About a year and a half ago, I told my brother what happened and we went back into those woods looking for the house's foundation, but I didn't find anything. Although our search wasn't very thorough though. It was winter, so it's pretty cold and had snow on the ground. But it'd be hard to pick out where the house was meant to be because of the snow. Growing up, I'd spent much of my life playing outside with my friends. This is in the days before you had video games and things like that, so it was pretty normal to make your own fun. All I'd have to do is take my bike, and after riding for about an hour or so, I'd be with my friends. I know that sounds like a long time, but I lived out in the backwoods, miles away from cars, so it wasn't really dangerous and it didn't feel so long because you're out in the woods. Now, later in my career, I became a park ranger, so I kind of got used to weird people and weird situations, but this is something that I couldn't explain from my childhood. Now, this actually comes from a number of things that happened to me, which all led to one specific event. So let me begin. So, I was playing out with my friends on one particular day, and one of my friends swears that he's seen a house out in the woods, deep in the middle of nowhere, but he knows exactly where it is. He says, "God, there's a woman that haunts it and it's so scary. I really need you guys to see it." Now, we knew he wasn't making it up because when his brother came back from vacation, he was also saying the same thing. So one day we set out to find this. We had our bikes with us originally, but had to quickly dismount them. We decided to leave them because we knew it was going to be too difficult to proceed. There were rocks and things everywhere, so it was going to be really a headache to travel with them, so we decided not to. Now, we do notice some people further up also on bikes, and one, we have no idea how that they could have been on bikes out here because of how rough the terrain is, and two, we've seldom seen people here, so we thought it was a pretty bizarre thing, but we don't think too much of it and continue on. Now, funnily, this friend almost immediately gets lost and can't figure out where it is. He's basically adamant to not give up on trying to find it, but he doesn't really have a clue of where he's going. The nature's very nice though, but we're on quite a narrow path which is quite sheer. If you fell, you wouldn't really break anything, but you definitely get hurt. I've actually had the honour of falling in once and it wasn't fun. I ended up getting quite a lot of cuts and things and messed up some of my clothes, which was quite annoying. Now, after not too long, my friend finally gives up and says that we're not going to find this place. I say yeah, that's fine, and we decide to start heading back. Now, I kid you not, just as we've started to turn around, we hear a really deep banshee type scream, one that echoes off the surrounding hills. It was far too loud to be a person. At the very least it would have been a large animal, but upon listening to the scream over the 2 seconds it lasted, you could hear some distinct words being spoken, and that was to get out. It's very hard to really figure out exactly what this voice was saying because I had so much adrenaline that I just couldn't focus on what I was hearing. But I look at my friends, and my friend who then led us out there confirmed that yes, he actually heard the same thing. Now we're panicking. As you can imagine, being young kids, we basically scream too and sprint out in the opposite direction. The best part about this is that we don't really know where we're going, and we ended up getting more lost in the woods. Now it ended up getting really bad because it starts to get dark, and one, I don't want to lose my bike. My parents have only just got me it, and growing up I really didn't have much money. So if I lost the bike it was going to be a big thing, but yeah, I really couldn't find it, and that was quite worrying. And two, I didn't want to be out here in the dark with the demon. And my parents were going to kill me if I wasn't back in time. Filled with more rage now, I start strutting around trying my very best to find where the bikes could be, and thankfully we found them. Now we all split off in our different directions, and none of us really say anything. We're just rushing to try and get back home. I've never pedalled so hard in my life because I was absolutely convinced that the demon thing was going to chase after me. I know now it could have just been a person out there, or maybe a large animal. That was probably the biggest threat, but I guess back then you really don't think like that. So I was pretty concerned by this, and I well and truly didn't feel comfortable. I just knew that I had to find my way home safely. So I get in and I get banned from being on my bike for a while, which was really annoying. I didn't really explain what had happened to my parents. I knew I was going to be grounded, and I thought, you know what, this is going to be a lot worse for me if I say what's actually happened. I know looking back on it now, I should have probably explained because it could have been a really dangerous situation. Who knows what was out there that day? Well, I'll tell you who doesn't know, me. So now fast forward a couple of months. My friend is still going on about us trying to find this place, and I kind of didn't want to this time. Normally I'm one of the real adventurers in the group, but I just couldn't be bothered. I didn't want to lose my bike luxuries again because I've just lost them, but he persists, and I guess we had nothing better to do, so I say sure. Now, I remember the day that we're going to set off again. He said that he knows the exact place this is. You know why? He said he had a dream about it. Being young, I really bought into this and thought, you know what, this time we're actually going to find it. So, we're riding down the path this time. We're actually on the more concrete area which leads into the main part of the forest, and we were going really quick. Next thing I know, I'm hitting the ground hard. My hands are stinging and something was off. I realised that I've crashed on my bike. I'd stupidly tried to go off onto what appeared to be a more flat part of the path, but I've gone straight over a big stone and ended up getting some cuts on myself. I didn't worry too much about it though. I was sat down for a while, and I tell my friends that they should just go on without me and that I need to get back home. I was young, but I was still quite concerned by this and ruining my clothes. I didn't want to get blood all over them. I know I have to get back to my mum. Now my friends, being the great friends they are, say sure and head off without me and leave me there. I look at the bike and it seems a little bit stuffed at first. I can't get the wheels to turn, so I ended up just laying there for a while. Now that's when I noticed someone. There's an elderly woman approaching. She's coming from just beyond the tree line up to my right. I look ahead and see if my friends are there to confirm if they're seeing this too, but they aren't. They're long gone. I'm a little bit worried now and very hastily get up and start trying to make my bike move. I'm trying to get the wheels to work, but I just can't seem to do it. For some reason I had a feeling that she was coming to help me, but she gets a little bit closer and just stops, smiling at me. Now she has some of the most jagged and rotten teeth that I've ever seen before. It's like this person had never seen a toothbrush in their life. Weirdly, their clothes didn't seem too dirty considering that she's just come from the forest and surely they should have some markings on them. She's wearing a kind of dark coloured dress, but it looks pretty immaculate. If I had to guess her age, I'd say she's probably about 70 or 75. I'm not too sure. I wave at her and don't get anything back. I then say hello, and suddenly, her expression changes, looking completely blank, almost like it's looking through me. Now that was creepy. I can't really make out much about her eyes because she has pretty bloodshot eyes, so I quickly get my bike, pick it up, and thankfully the wheels start moving while I'm walking. I look over my shoulder, and I can still see her there watching me. For some reason I wasn't overwhelmed with fear by this, as I know a lot of people might be. This is kind of uncharacteristic for me too, because often I am the scaredy cat, but not in this situation. I start pedaling slowly at first, but I then see that she's still there staring at me, and as you can imagine, I picked up the pace pretty promptly. Now I ended up getting back home, and my mum's very concerned about me. Annoyingly, she put this stinging stuff all over my cuts. I mean, it's probably antiseptic, whatever, but my god, did it burn like I've never felt a burn before. Honestly, it almost sent my whole body into shock how strong this stuff is. It was so much so that I'd actually forgot about what had happened until my mum asked again. I say I crashed over the stone, and then the lady come. Mum says, "What lady?" and asks me to describe her. And I explain everything that happened, and she looks at me kind of weird. She knows that there's no cars around there for miles. It's just the paths. You might get the odd truck, but it was very uncommon. She tells me that if ever I see that lady again, to come straight back and don't try and talk to her. I say, "But Mum, I couldn't even talk to her." I get the reply of, "I don't want to hear it." I'm then grounded and lose my bike privileges again. So it's starting to get quite irritating now. So not only are my friends out having this great adventure, I've crashed my bike on flat ground, hurt myself and got grounded again. I was pretty worried now because usually my mum does the 3 strikes and you're out kind of way of things. If I lose a bike again, I don't know if I'll see it again. So I'm pretty upset. Now eventually my mum does release me from her prison and I'm allowed to go out. And I catch up with my friends and ask them what happened. They then say that they still couldn't find it, and I started laughing. They then ask why I'm not allowed on my bike, and I explain, and my friend says, "That's her. That's the lady who lives there." I say, "What do you mean?" He says, "The lady that haunts the house, you saw her." And I'm not buying any of it. I say, "The day I believe you is the day I see the house." And what happens? Nothing for the next 2 months, until eventually I get my bike back and it's time to go out once more. In the time without my bike, I'm actually super bored because I'm basically stuck indoors all day and I'm just watching the days go past. I did get some video games in, so I just killed hours on it, but it couldn't compete with being with my friends. Now, we decide that we're going to set out one last time to try and find this house. Again, I really don't believe it's there. I don't believe any of it's true, but my friend constantly goes on about it. So now, we get on that path once again, and this time I'm constantly scanning the ground. I'm very scared to go over another rock again and get hurt. It's not actually the feeling of crashing that actually bothers me, it's more the fact that I don't want to have a crash and get that stinging stuff on me. The thing was, at this point, even if we did find anything, I was sure to just lie about it, because I think, what's the point of telling my mom about what's happened if I'm only going to get grounded again? So I swear that no matter what happens, I'm not going to tell her anything. Now we were riding for miles and miles, and eventually my friend said, "Stop," and we all stop. He says, "Leave our bikes here." We take them off to the side and actually throw them into the bushes so people can't find them. They're pretty well concealed now, which is something we're all happy about. Now we get up and we start going through the woods on this little path. My friend is absolutely convinced and certain that this is the way that we need to go to be able to get away from everyone and finally find where this house is. He says, "This is it. This is what I found before. None of us really believed him, but I guess being gullible, part of us wanted it to be real. Now we walked for miles and miles, and we still don't seem to be getting any closer to anything. I tell him, really, is this actually a thing or is it just a figure of your imagination? He then says be quiet, and I don't. I just keep on going until eventually, there it is. In a break in the trees you can see an old white house. It kind of looked like an old English cottage but slightly bigger. It certainly looked old and very abandoned. It was 2 stories tall and looked like nobody had been there for as long as I had been alive, at least 5 times over. Now at this point I get a little freaked out, but my friend is persistent that we have to press forward to find it. We have to go in there. We have to know that it's real. I agreed, kind of getting more and more excited at this time. As we start to step towards it, a crow must have broke out of a tree nearby and it really made us jump. All of my friends are laughing at me for being so scared, but I don't know, I felt extremely on edge in this situation and it's kind of like something I haven't felt before for a long time. Even working now as a ranger, I still haven't had that feeling. I think I was too on edge. I was too ready for something to happen. Now we go a little bit further ahead, and then I can see some kind of movement. It almost looks like there's a cat or something in one of the top windows moving round. It's all black, I can't see eyes, but I knew something was in there. I think maybe it's an animal. And we continue going forward. I don't know, I'm getting a really bad feeling about this, one of my friends says. But again, we say that we've come this far and that we need to figure out what this is. And so we press forward even more. Now eventually we get up to where the door was. And I, probably being the bravest at the time, decided to step in first. And this place smelled really weird. It was kind of like an old smell. One that I hadn't smelt before, and something smelt really bad in there. I didn't know what it was. I kept on and on searching for the source of the smell, but I really couldn't find anything. So that was something quite strange. I just expected either something to jump out at me constantly, or to see some kind of dead animal or thing there to make sense of the smell, but again, there's nothing. Now, I decided to go up the stairs to see what else is up there, and this place looks like it is from about the 1800s. There's no furniture or anything. There is a picture on the wall, but it's all faded off and you can't really see what it once was. I don't think it was a picture, but some kind of portrait, but it's gone now. I then see a big spider go up the wall and I really don't like that. I'm looking for the cat though and I can't find it. I think this is odd, so I continue my search. I was sure I saw something in here. Even if it wasn't a cat, I just had the urge to know exactly what it is and just figure out what was going on up here. Now, I end up going further ahead, and while my friends are down, I realise that there's an upstairs area. There are stairs that go up another level. I go up the stairs and I can see a suitcase. I don't see anything else there, and I decide that I'm going to open it up. I have to know what's in here. Even if it's bugs or something, I really want to know. As I go to open it, I hear a sound behind me. It's movement. I'm not bothered, I think that it's one of my friends, and I slowly turn around, and there I see it. A woman crouched in the corner, staring at me. I then realise this is a woman that I saw before, and she slowly smiles at me. I drop the suitcase down immediately. It startles me, but not her. One of my friends then joins me on the stairs and screams the second he sees the woman. Something about her didn't look real or human. The next thing I know, we're sprinting down those stairs. They felt impossibly long. It was almost like it had doubled in length. My other friends were also screaming now, and we all come flying out of the house, saying, "What was that? What on earth was that?" I say I don't know, and we start explaining to the others what we saw. One of my friends is constantly looking around and he swears that he can see someone staring at us out of the window. We don't bother looking around. I mean, me and the guy who saw it, we just keep running. We were surprisingly fit as we probably made it about 500 meters before slowing down again. We all stopped for a moment, now feeling safe that we were away from the house, saying, what did we see? No, none of us can agree on exactly what we saw. We keep looking around to where the house is, but weirdly we can't find it. I know that we run off and we're quite worried and disorientated, but we should be able to see the house, so it doesn't make sense why it's not there. I start to kind of lurch backwards a bit as I realise that the fear's really taken a toll on me. It's like my vision's gone a bit weird. We then start moving again. We start running as quick as we can, and we're trying desperately to locate our bikes. We eventually come back to the main path, but our bikes are nowhere to be found. Of course not, how could we possibly find it out here? How are we going to be able to differentiate it from the surroundings when everything looks the same? We didn't think of this at the time. I didn't even care about the bike. Now the thing that makes this suck is it's going to be a long journey back without the bikes, but we just can't find them. I do want to search for a bit longer, but my friends are all too scared, and we take off running again. We don't get too far as we're really tired now, and we have to start walking. What's worse is we've got about 2 hours of daylight now ahead of us. We're all discussing, running through the probabilities of what it was, and suddenly I get annoyed at the friend saying, why didn't you tell me that was there? He says, I can't know what's up there, I've never been in there before. We all look at him then, kind of annoyed, as if to say, well, why didn't you let us know that before? He doesn't reply though. And eventually, we get to the part where we have to split ways. We all say goodbye to each other, and then watch my friends go off in different directions. I don't know why, I just felt the need to stop there for a second or so, just to try and figure out or at least make sense of what had happened, but I can't really make sense of anything. I then think, God, my bike, this isn't good. I'm going to be in so much trouble. And I start to fabricate an excuse to my mum as to what's happened to my bike, so at least then maybe she won't be too annoyed at me. It was stolen, that's it. I'm going to tell her it was stolen. Eventually, after a 2-hour walk, I get home just before the sunset. My mum can see me without my bike and says what happened, and it was stolen, Mum. I think a kid stolen it. Weirdly, she wasn't annoyed at all. She said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that, honey. We'll get you another one. Dinner's ready. I'm really surprised, and I take my food and go and sit in my room to eat it. Now fast forward to all these years later, and even in my current line of work, I've never seen anything so strange, and I still can't really make sense of it all. I don't know what I could have possibly seen up there. I'm just glad that I wasn't the only person to have seen it, and somebody else did, because if it was just me, I probably wouldn't have believed it. Now, I've been camping in this one spot in the middle of a national park in NC in the wilderness for years. Here are my stories. So in September 2017, a friend and I went camping here for a long weekend, and we participated in a local paddling festival. He ended up being almost 10 hours late, so I wandered around in the wilderness for a while. In retrospect, this feels crazy. I found a giant. And when I say giant, I mean industrial-sized refrigerator about 10 yards in the woods from where I set up camp. Fast forward to when my friends joined me. So the 8 strangers who set up camp about 15 yards north of us, which isn't a big deal. When it's Monday morning though and we have to part ways, we notice that the fridge is gone. We checked the river and that was just west of our sight and it hadn't fallen in. We thought that maybe the campers north of us had taken it. But the thing was at least the size of a smart car and inches sunken into the ground. I've gone back since and I'm still haunted by the whole incident. Now in February 2018, a friend of mine and I went camping during the week of our college having a break. She'd never been camping before and I felt somewhat scared connecting that site to what I felt like was a no. Better introduce her to a camping place that's better though than drag her into the backcountry of the NC mountains in winter. So we set up camp and went for a somewhat local hike, and we were hiking northbound. A younger attractive couple passed us going southbound. Now we remember their faces well, or my friend does, and this becomes important later on, which is good since I have difficulties with facial recognition. We get some dry firewood from the closest Walmart since it's been snowing all day, and when we return it's pitch black outside. On the dirt to the site, maybe a mile out, we pass a car facing us. On the side of the road, it's actually parked up with its hazards on and honked randomly. I attempt to see if any of the owners need some help, but we're 2 young college women in the woods by ourselves and we don't want to tempt fate. As I slowed, we saw the 2 people jump in the river with their flashlights. Now, my friend swears that they were the couple from the hike. A couple nights later, we stood around our measly fire, dampened by the continual snowfall, when I suddenly but surely lose all sense of direction. Even though I'm looking at the fire listening to my friend talk, I cannot tell if I'm facing the road, the car, her, the tent or the river. And this feeling lasts for a couple of minutes and I don't remember her saying anything else at the time. Once I calm down a bit and move towards the other side of the fire, I feel somebody behind me and I hear the jiggle of what sounds like keys. My keys are in the tent and there were no other campers for miles, at least that I was aware of. I was just paralyzed with fear and kept feeling this dark, heavy kind of presence creeping up on me. It felt like it's right on my heels about to grab me, and I punch up behind me but feel nothing. We ended up leaving the campsite the next day due to snow. Okay, now, my dad told me a story recently that I've really been wanting to share on here. This is from back when I was a kid in Mexico. When my dad was a kid, he and my grandpa went to my grandpa's land to prepare the soil for planting crops. Bored, my dad wandered off to a nearby stream where he saw a bunch of human-like dolls playing around in the water. He said they looked like they're adults, only smaller, with proportions like dolls. Not exactly sure what that means. They splash around in the water and at times, it looks as though they're walking on it. They signal at him to come and play with them, and my dad actually runs over to this excitedly. He said he played with them for a while when my grandpa noticed that he had wandered off and went to find him. When my grandpa found my dad seemingly playing alone by the stream, getting all wet, he got super mad and dragged him away. Apparently, my grandpa and grandma were never able to see what exactly was waving goodbye to my dad. After that, my dad started seeing this dueneds around the house. They'd pop out from behind walls during dinner, and my dad would try to feed them scraps of food, much to my grandma's annoyance. Eventually they get worried and go to a local curandera. She had a little ritual and told him to keep a cigarette behind his ear for a week, and then they were gone. So it turned out that the grandparents were also able to see them a bit. My dad swears that it's all true though. Nobody ever really believes him and he's embarrassed by the story. The only reason that he told me is because my mum teases him about it and forced it out of him. This story occurred from when I was in high school around 2010-ish. My parents' house backed up to a small wooded area. It's not a forest by any means. There were walking trails and other neighbourhoods around it, but the woods were big enough that we used to see deer and the occasional fox. There was also a small creek that ran through it. I used to spend time in the fall/winter poking around there, but it obviously wasn't obscured by brush then. I found what I assumed was likely a deer path that ran all the way up to my old elementary school, which was about a block away via roads, but using the deer trails took about 10 or 15 minutes. I was back in this fairly often, which meant the following story was weird. I went down to the creek one day and followed the trail like normal, but this time I found a partial deer skeleton at the end. The head and legs were missing. The rest was still there, but there was no blood, and that was strange. They were stripped completely clean. I mean, even the bones, and they're bright white. At the time, there weren't any coyotes in the area like there are now, and I've never seen a bobcat there. To this day, I have no idea how the skeleton actually got there, or what happened to it. It was too clean to be a predator kill, and that doesn't explain why the front half of it was missing. I got so freaked out that I actually never went back to those woods again. Now, a couple of years back, myself and my mother were visiting her sister in the north of the country, a few hundred miles from where we lived. My mum had decided to drive rather than take the train, and after staying the weekend, we started our return trip. We left on a Monday morning, but as the distance to our town was so great, we called in with my mother's friend with the intention of spending the night. It was a really nice house, but it's literally in the middle of nowhere, at least a mile from the next nearest house and miles again from the nearest town or shop. As we get close to the house, a huge summer storm hit, torrential rain, thunder and lightning. It turned out to be quite lucky. We had planned to stay overnight at that place because the driving conditions were so dangerous. The house was undergoing a massive interior renovation at the time, which meant that my mum and me would be spending the night crashing in the living room as all the spare bedrooms were out of commission. Once the workmen had left for the day, we spent most of the day and that of the evening on the back porch watching the storm before we turned in for the night. I crashed on the couch while my mum took a leather divan style sofa that was placed directly under the window that faced away to the driveway. Late into the night, I woke up feeling very uneasy, as if I'm being watched. I opened my eyes but didn't move anything other than my head towards where my mum was sleeping. There was a hooded black figure standing at the window over my mum, with his hands up to the window, trying to see if anybody was there or anything like that. Now I should mention that the driveway had a very powerful light fixed on a pole at the edge of the front yard. My mum, exhausted from driving, was completely out of the count, despite the window being no more than 18 inches from her face. The figure continued to slowly scan the room, then stopped, suddenly, as if he'd just seen me. The yard was positioned so that no light was cast into the house, so the room was completely pitch black. By now, the severity of the storm had increased and thunder and lightning was striking frequently. As though on cue, a lightning strike hit what seemed to illuminate the whole room. Now the figure actually moved from his vantage point and started walking towards the right-hand side of the house, where there is another window offering a better room and a better view of everything. Without saying anything, I waited until the figure's out of sight and I slid off the couch, scuttling into the doorway just off the living room and out of the second window's line of sight. I peek from behind the wall and can see a figure at the window. By this time, I was freaked and unsure exactly what to do. Lightning hit once again, and the figure snapped his head right to where I was hiding. I remembered being almost frozen, feeling his eyes which are locked onto me. He left the second window and headed back towards the first. I somehow managed to move, running the stairway in the corner room that led up to the bedroom of my mother's friends. I burst in shouting that there's a man there outside looking in. Once over the initial surprise of everything and waking them up in such a panic, my father, a large man in his own right, jumped up, summoning his eldest son who's a few years older than me, found some cricket bats and marches down the stairs. The rest of the family and myself followed warily. My mum, having been woken up, who was somewhat drowsy by the commotion, met us at the bottom of the stairs, having just passed in the hallway by her best friend's half-naked husband, toting a cricket bat and marching out into the storm. I explained what happened, but could tell my mum was in equal parts skeptical, as she was also shocked. We waited for what felt like an eternity in the darkness, as no one thought or perhaps dared to turn on a light. Mum's friend tried to reassure us that it's just a late-night traveller who had broken down or got lost. Her husband and son returned after a minute or two. The husband went as far as to get changed and check the ground before he hopped in his car and drove down the road a couple of miles in both directions. There was nothing else though. There had been no sound of a car leaving or the driveway or any physical evidence of anybody being outside. This basically did little to reassure me, and I was unable to shake the feeling of being watched, the same feeling that had originally awoken me. We managed a fitful night before we gathered our things and set out the following day. My mum was convinced though that I'd imagined the whole thing and told her friend's son by the way of apology. This annoyed me at first, although I knew it was the most logical explanation for them, as no one else had actually seen the figure. Looking to forget the whole experience, I did not argue this matter. As my mother said her goodbyes, I went and snapped a picture at the house before returning to find her waiting by the car and ready to go. I quickly popped my head in the house to say my own goodbyes and apologise for waking them from last night. Eventually the car horn kept sounding, with 2 long continuous beeps, and a third and final one which was a bit shorter. I then went outside the house to where the car was parked and it hadn't moved, and sat with all the doors closed apart from the passenger door to the driver's side, which is open. As I get in the car, I see my mum slumped in the wheel. Frantically, I pulled open the door, trying to shake her awake. I found the pulse on her neck, which seems to be strong, but it seems to be unconscious. I pulled her out of the car and shouted to help as I dragged her into the house. I sat her on the couch, and it's the same one that I slept on the night before, and with the help of her friend managed to bring her around from what I assume is a fainting spell. Thankfully she revived quickly, and within an hour was ready to hit the road. Her friends were more than happy to let us stay for the day, and we were quite against her driving anyway. After what had happened, though, she was keen to get home, and I was not keen to spend another night there, although I was still feeling guilt as I wasn't too brave to really talk her out of driving. She didn't remember passing out or even getting into the car. Now, about a year ago, my girlfriend and I were on a trail at Lemonil Lake in northern Nevada. It's about 1.5 miles each way, I believe. Usually pretty well populated. It was that day as well. There were at least a handful of people on the trail here and there, plenty down at the trailhead and parking lot. It was otherwise a totally normal sunny day. Evening come quite quickly and we started heading back down, not wanting to be out when it got dark, as there was no cell service up here for quite a distance, and it was just an afternoon hike. We started down the trail and I got to the slightest hint of a bad feeling, like we definitely needed to get back to our car before it got dark. I think that's generally just common sense and doesn't need to be prompted by a sixth sense or anything. Still, I keep an eye out as we went. Weirdly, absolutely nothing happened until we're maybe 300 yards away from the parking lot. The trees had largely been left behind as we descended in elevation, and bushes, large and small, were instead there. There was a creek that ran through to our right. Ahead of us, maybe 50 yards away, was a lone woman and her medium-sized dog on a leash. Now, I've got my head on swivel the whole day because I was just trying to keep an eye out and make sure that the hint of bad feeling didn't amount to anything which I was carrying. The woman ahead of us was up about the same distance for a while down the trail, and I felt somewhat reasonably safe with her there. If anything was strange to happen, it would probably be mountain lions, which are known to live up there. Now, as we were walking, me and my girlfriend both heard what sounded like a big boulder sliding and grafting along a stone surface. It lasted like a few seconds, and we were both looking at the stone surface about 600 meters to our left. Now, fully expecting basically a landslide, but there was nothing, and daylight was good enough to see if anything was coming from there, and there definitely wasn't anything. I immediately looked to the lady ahead of us, and just a second later, she and her dog started booking it. Right as they did, a herd of deer came sprinting out of the bushes, away from the boulder. Now, they ran across the creek and kept going to our right. After now pausing for a second to discuss that weird noise and what it could have been, I then drew my gun. We passed the same little section where the lady was when she took off, and thankfully nothing happened. I didn't really hear or see anything in those bushes, though I'm not surprised. A whole herd of deer was in there and we couldn't see them until they literally ran out, despite being at greater elevation at this time. We quickly made it back to the parking lot and I put my gun back in its holster. It felt safe getting to the pavement for some reason. We caught up with the woman and dog. She started to catch her breath and was panicking a little. We asked if she heard the weird sound and she said she heard the loud bouldery sound, and then off to her left close by she distinctly heard a big low growl, and then she heard the deer coming. The deer would have probably ran right into her if she didn't move. Watching this happen from afar above was just weird. We've determined that it could have been a mountain lion, but I've still got two questions. Why did I get the feeling that we needed to leave ever so abruptly, an hour before anything happened? And why/how was it able to make the big sound of boulders moving, and then the woman heard a growl? But why was it not by us? I think this indicates that there was definitely something in those bushes. However, I'm very confused about the bigger sound. I doubt the same animal had made a huge boulder scraping sound, so there was probably two of them, but I never really got to figure out what this could have been. Last summer, a good friend and I embarked on a backpacking trip through the White Mountain National Forest in New Hampshire. As fairly experienced day hikers, we felt comfortable in the Whites for our inaugural overnight trip. While planning, my buddy Ellis figured that we could hike to a country and make our way into the first wilderness night, which is more fun. I wasn't going to disagree. Beautiful views, historic trails, and protected night in the dry river wilderness. I was stoked, to say the very least. Now, before any hiking trip, I do a little internet search on the trails or shelters that I'll be crossing. Throughout the mid to late 1900s, there were a series of these lean-to ups and downs on the dry river, which are meant for backpackers or through hikers really looking to escape the crowds in more popular areas of the forest. Though as time went on, the Forest Service had more and more pressing matters to deal with. Therefore, many of these shelters were actually dismantled, except for Dry River Shelter number 3. the last remaining shelter in the wilderness zone. On the morning of our hike, I met my friend at the trailhead and we set off. The sky was overcast, bringing with it a dense fog through the forest. The weather left us with nearly no visibility. There were stunning views, and at least the trail consisted of a prime, technical New England rock scrambling alongside the river. Now my friend and I made it up the Presidential Ridge, stopping by the Lake of Clouds. The hut was filled with day hikers, backpackers and thru hikers all socializing together. We were even rewarded with some more sun and a brief glimpse of the dry river valley on the summit of Mount Monroe. Before the fog rolled back in, we'd see that there's dwindling views and stiff wind, so we decided to hustle below the tree line down to the dry river shelter 3. This will be our home for the night. Once we dropped off the ridge into the valley, we entered the wilderness zone, where rangers patrolled sparingly. Time to really be alone, I thought. As we trekked into the wilderness, all signs of civilization disappeared, and the trail was densely overgrown. Although it's been raining all week, there were no footprints in the mud either. At least we would have some relaxing isolation together, I figure. After about an hour or so of descending, my friend spotted the lean-to just as our legs were asking for relief. A gorgeous old timber structure with a well-used fire pit alongside a cold mountain river. I mean, this is well and truly pristine camping. As we settled in and explored the site, I found a small bound notebook nestled into the corner of the structure. On the cover somebody wrote, "Dry River Shelter 3. Out of curiosity, however, I opened it, but found nothing more than a lone man's name scribbled onto the first page and a date. Now, just your standard camping log. Oddly though, the man had signed the book the prior day, but we see no evidence or signs of humans or even animals or disturbance upon the trail here at the shelter. The rain can actually wash away tracks, but not all signs of animal life. Something felt off to me. I showed it to Ellis, who found it curious, but nothing more than the single name. He convinced me that the man was probably a hiking veteran and professional LNT. I brought this into my friend's thoughts though, and the situation eases my mind now. As the sun set, we started a roaring fire alongside the riverbank. My friend commented on how quiet the location is, having not seen another soul beyond the chirp of birds since leaving the Crawford path. The silence was eerie, but we figured that the city life desensitized us to the wild. The sun was setting and we grew tired and into the darkness. My friend took the lean-to and I spent the night in my tent. Sleep comes quickly after hiking 8+ miles with the 20 pounds on my back, but this didn't last too long. A brutally sharp slapping noise woke me. The only thing I could compare the noise to would be somebody swinging a 2x4 into a tree and a snapping thick branch. I figured it was a bear coming for our food bag, hanging in the tree, maybe 10 to 50 yards away. Nothing out of the ordinary for New Hampshire. Sleep overtook me once again, and I remembered waking up to the sun rising over the peaks. I stumbled out of my tent to see my friend also waking up slowly. As we made our morning oats and coffee, I wandered around the site again to see if I could find the marks that the bear had left. Instead, I noticed something strange. The small notebook was open. I swear that I put it back where I found it. I closed it and put it to the corner of the shelter, not on the floor. I say, "Hey, were you checking out the camp log last night?" "No, I passed out, man." "It's not like there was anything in there to read anyway," he responded. "Are you sure?" I commented as I bent over to pick it up. The lone hiker was not so lonely anymore. At least 20 more filled the pages. The lone traveller, whose name was originally on the first page, could now be found several pages deep into the notebook. I tossed it to my friend, whose face instantly dropped the second that his mind registered what page is on. Great. Now I know that it wasn't just delusionalness from dehydration. Wow, we must have seen things last night. There's no way that we missed all those names. How could we? Both of us. This is when I began to tell my friend about the slapping noise the night before. I received nothing other than instant denial. These sounds were not the result of some hooligans or backward crazies harassing us. Rather sternly, my friend says, "It's a bear, Jack. It's a bear, Jack. Let's go now." And we did go. My friend led us out of there. Now, a year has passed since, and I'm not quite sure what happened that night, on that dry river shelter number 3, that lonely day. The memory of seeing the note so clearly laid out was so crisp in my mind, I could not have mistaken it. Could I have mistaken the noises I heard before and the new additions? I don't think so, especially not having my friend there too. So what was it? What happened to us that night? Now the following is a series of weird things that happened to me that I truly can't explain. Now what annoys me most about this is that I've tried to tell people my experience and they kind of just laugh it off. Actually, I told one of my colleagues at work today. I work as a forest server fire patrol person, but when I told them my story, they kind of just laughed at me and said, "Oh yeah, is that really what happened?" And that really annoys me. And this is supposed to be someone that's quite similar and that I'd actually consider a friend there, and also had weird experiences before, so I just don't get it. People are so eager to hear what you say, but then they're so happy and quick to dismiss everything. I just don't get it. But let's dive into my story and hopefully at least a few of you will understand. Now, emotionally, I wasn't really the same after this. I don't know why. I'm not a spiritual person and I don't really believe in religion much, but this kind of made me think about what else is really out there. Where I live, there can be lots of snow all the time, but I love to go on my little adventures, and there was a forest that was supposedly haunted near where I lived. Now, I'd heard quite a few things about this place, and apparently you'll hear screams in the night. You'll see headless people wandering around, and I guess just the works really. Now, I'd actually been here on 2 occasions before. One was when I drove out with one of my friends, but to be honest, it was just the biggest waste of time. I mean, literally nothing happened. We were driving for a long time to get there, and basically nothing happened, and we just get bored and come back. So I wasn't expecting too much in the second time that I'd been there. Again, nothing had happened, but in more recent times, I'd moved much closer and thought, why not go? Also, there was quite a nice snowfall, so I thought this was pretty cool. I really like going on adventures at night time like this, especially when the elements are involved. For whatever reason, it kind of makes me feel almost like I'm in a movie, especially if I've got my AirPods with me and I just listen to songs, and it really creates a vibe. I always found it empowering, but yeah. So I set out at night, and I walked towards the forest off of the main path, and it's really dark. The stars are looking absolutely beautiful above me, and luckily there's no cars coming, so I just get off and straight into where the forest starts. There was probably about 30 meters of snow or whatnot before it actually starts. Then you've hit by lots of trees. Now I turn my flashlight on, and suddenly I can see really well. I had a really powerful one that was actually adapted for cameras and stuff. I was actually joking with one of my friends, it's like turning on the daytime and there's nothing to be scared of. And I also said that this probably scares away the spirits more than anything. They probably think it's God. I think of these jokes as I can see my breath in front of me from the cold. Now, it's kind of like the snow that's fallen quite quickly to the ground, almost like it's kind of sleep, but it's not. It's still snowing. I notice it as I take my first steps into the forest. I have some pretty skinny trees on either side of me when I see something that looks odd. I can see what appears to be a white silhouette to my left when suddenly it vanishes. I'm a little confused by this, but suddenly I realise that it must be my breath from where I've got my scarf and things. I think it's a little odd, and I tell myself just relax a bit, and I keep walking. The trees are kind of like overarching here, and it actually looks really beautiful. I do notice one odd thing. There seems to be footprints that lead off from the main trail, but they kind of look like hoof shapes. I thought maybe some kind of animal went through here, or God knows what. It couldn't have been horse riding because the branches are actually too low. To give you an idea, they're probably about 8 feet above me or dropping down to 5, so you'd have to duck sometimes. Now these aren't nice branches too. They're the kinds that come snagged on each other, and if you make one loose, it's going to kind of whip you in the face. And I didn't want to lose my eyes. But it wasn't too much of an issue really. So when I set off, I didn't really have a direction or place that I wanted to go to. I heard there was an old church that used to be here, and I thought, you know what, that would be pretty cool if I can find that. Who knows what would happen if I go there on my own. Now at the time, I was certain no other people around because I literally can't hear anything or see anyone. A really good telling sign is the fact that there's no lights. You kind of need lights to see where you're going out here, but I literally couldn't see any. Every so often, I look off into the woods and I don't see anything. I did notice one or two strange sounds, but they didn't happen too frequently. I know that there's lots of animals out here because of my normal line of work, and just I guess from having some good sense about my surroundings, so I didn't let it put me off. I knew I had to be careful of certain animals out here because I guess some could hunt at night, but I was going to be far bigger and they wouldn't dare go to me. The sky almost looks like a beautiful orangey colour above me because of my torch, and I think that's really pretty. I do start to feel the cold a bit now, so decide to pick up the pace. Another interesting thing is there's lots and lots of footprints on this path which have been here earlier, and I think that's a little bit bizarre because usually people don't hum here too often. I'm very used to going out here and there's no one around, so that was interesting. As I'm walking, the snow's now going directly into my face, and it actually made it a bit annoying, to be honest. I stopped for a moment to try and figure out the direction of it so I can try and avoid it when I hear a howling off. Now I don't know exactly where it's coming from, but there seems to be another little trail where you can cut through going off of the main path, but I decide not to follow it just in case. I was kind of expecting to run into some crazy dog walker or something, but they never showed up, so I think this is a little bit odd. Eventually I come up to one of the trail signs and I can see some of the wildlife that lives here, and I think to myself, well, there's definitely nothing that's going to hunt me, as it's just birds and things like that. But I do wonder what the sound is that I heard. Now, I go a little bit further along and eventually the snow picks up even more now. It felt a little bit different and almost like the weather had become more hostile now. Again, I'm not a spiritual person, but it almost started to feel a bit more like the air was different here. Now, the only way I can describe what I was seeing if you haven't been in the woods at night in the snow is everything sort of looks like an infinite dream. It's almost like somebody's made an unlimited map of just forest, snow, woods, and it's just going to keep on going forever. You do have to be careful out here though, because if you really go off the path, then you don't want to be stuck out in the cold like this. As you can imagine, trying to get a fire going is not easy at the best of times, let alone here. As I'm thinking of this, I hear sounds up above again. I can hear somebody scurrying through the tree line. Well, at least that's what I think it is. And I pause for a second, and I go to switch my flashlight with one that has more of a focus beam. And I kid you not, as this is happening, I can see what appears to be a really small kind of lanky armed person scurrying through the woods. And I take a moment to figure out what this is. I quickly flicker on my other light, which is more powerful, and I don't see anything, so I just put it down to my mind going a little bit loose. I do have to say, I've never seen anything like this, and I think this is really weird. Annoyingly, my eyes didn't adjust well enough in the darkness to actually see this thing, and I have tried telling this part to some other people, but again, they all just say, oh yeah, it's just a rabbit. But I mean, come on, I've seen rabbits, and this thing had lanky arms. I can only describe it as if a person was about 3 feet tall, had a very large torso, and very long skinny arms that dragged the floor. But I don't know where they gone. I tried looking around for more footprints, but I can't see anything, and this gives me a little bit of adrenaline to pick up the pace. I knew I'd gone out here hoping to find some ghosts and things, but now I wasn't so sure if I actually wanted to find them or not. Now again, I can see a mist form just in front of me, then slowly disappear again. It was a white mist, and it's really like somebody's just breathed in front of me and then vanished. I try and replicate how I was standing a few moments ago and pace backwards and start breathing more heavily to see if it was me, but there's nothing there. Pretty confused at this point, but I decided to just pick up the pace more. Now, I had one other scary experience before from being out in the woods I can think of now, but this was more to do with an animal than anything supernatural. I remember I'd gone somewhere and a big old moose appeared, and it was extremely close to me. For whatever reason, it didn't really take notice of me, it just looked at me for a second, but I remember that scared me. But that feeling that I had was kind of beginning to loom over me, and I started to wonder if maybe there was a large animal like that around. Now this is when I noticed the first strange structure. It's something that I hadn't realised before. It's a large wooden structure that looks like 3 trees, kind of in a Stonehenge shape, but a little bit less spread out. This is really weird. It's like they've been carved by hand and placed upright. And what was really bizarre is that there isn't much snow in the middle. It seems like the ground is staying particularly dry here, and not snow forming. Now, I think this is really bizarre because, well, where I am there shouldn't be anything like this. I would have been aware of it too, and I don't understand why I'd never noticed it before. It now becomes apparent that I'm not actually on the main path. I switch off my flashlight once more, and I just take a few seconds to take in everything. I'm trying to give my eyes some time to adjust to the darkness, and I look down at my battery. It's dropped down to 40% on the main flashlight thing, and that's a bit of a worry. Batteries drain pretty quick in the cold, and now I notice that there's more of the mist forming up ahead of me. I actually take a second just to assess what this actually is, but I can't figure out what it is. It's almost like a group of people standing there, kind of just like breathing or talking normally, but there's no one around, and it only seems to be spawning in a specific spot. Now, I once more get closer and try and figure out what this is, but I just can't. Now, it reminds me of a story of what one of my other Fire Ranger friends had told me about. Sorry to go off topic, but I think it's important because it might have been linked to what I saw. Now, one of my good friends had been working in the service for quite a number of years, and he would always try and prank us and pretend there was scary things out there. We never believed him, and sometimes he would actually get us with Halloween masks and stuff, and that was pretty creepy. But I remember one day that he come up to us and he looked very freaked out. He said, "Guys, I saw something and I don't know what it is." We ask him to elaborate, and he refuses for a while, but because I'm good friends with him, eventually he decides to tell me what he saw. Apparently, he thought he saw a fire, so he went over to investigate it. Apparently it was just a small red cherry glow, but that could be the start of something. Just as he got to where it was, it suddenly went out, and there was a very big mist that appeared, which is like a smoky white colour. It almost looked like there was a huge fire in terms of the amount of smoke, but nothing was burning. He said it stayed here for literally 3 or 4 minutes as he stared at this bewildered, until eventually it just vanishes. Now the reason that I'm telling you this is because it was incredibly similar to what I saw in terms of how he described it, the way that it moved, the slight opaqueness of it, everything was just weird. I stood there for what must have been about a good 4 minutes before eventually I decided that, yeah, I'm probably going to have to press through this now. I couldn't be waiting around here all day, and I decided to be brave and walk through it. I actually held my breath just before I did so because I didn't know if it was maybe some kind of dangerous chemical or something that had leaked out, but there wasn't anything. I eventually make it through after what felt like ages, to be honest, and I was actually gasping for breath. It probably took me a good 20 seconds to get through this. Eventually when I do, I turn around to try and figure out where it had gone, and I can't see it. I do think that I can see something just moving off into the distance, but I can't be sure. It was almost like a group of people had vanished, but one of them had just went off into the woods. Now, I'm a little bit freaked out, but again, I was here alone, so there's not really too much I can think of this. Now, I do notice something else very weird. There seems to be lots of really bizarre shaped footprints going off in different directions. They're all kind of like the hoof shaped, like the thing I'd seen earlier, but they're really far spread apart, like something quite tall had been walking. But it's walking as though that it's in complete arrogance to the trees that are there, like they don't exist. And again, I don't know what kind of animal could have done this. Now I walk on. I haven't really got a direction this time. I just know that I need to keep going. I have a feeling that I'm in a bad spot, and that's when I see something. This time I was certain that I was seeing something that was actually there. It was very far away, but I can only describe this as something which is completely black, with these white tusk arm things that was about 4 feet tall that hops around. I only saw this for a couple of seconds and it vanishes, but it's probably the scariest part of the encounter for me. I don't want to describe it as like a demonic thing because again I'm not spiritual, but I don't really know what this was. It's like a really weird creature that would stand awkwardly and almost like it was just bent out too far and shouldn't be balanced, but it was. I flash on both the lights at the same time searching for it, but again I don't see anything. I then realise that I'm not too far from a lake that I'm actually familiar with, and that's when I noticed a strange glow coming from the other side of it. Now, it was kind of like a glow of like a power plant would give, I guess, in the horizon. Almost like heat waves of light just emanating out slowly, again in the white colour, but almost having more of an energy to it. I decide that I have to investigate. Now, I was actually stupidly close to the shoreline now, because one slip, one twisted ankle and I could go through the ice and no one would get me here. I'd die of hypothermia before rescuers could find me, but the sense of adventure had taken over. I turn my light around again, and I can't see anything. For a second, I'm sure I can make out the faint glow of 2 eyes, but I don't know if this is just an animal, so I'm not too worried. There's also strange sounds coming from over where that the light is, and it's almost like lots of people talking played backwards, really far off, really far, like barely audible, but I could hear it. The forest was pretty quiet at this time, and I think it made it worse. I'm constantly flashing around with my lights, trying to just get whatever this is to show up more, but I can't see anything. Now, I know some people are asking me why wasn't I more scared of that weird thing I'd seen, and to be honest, I can't tell you that. It was almost like I was drawn into something, and a mixed personality had taken over where I was seeing weird things and they weren't welcoming, but they weren't worrying for whatever reason. like I had to go on further. I decided that I need to keep up my pace now, but I have some pretty good thoughts, and I think, well, I don't want to fall in the water and die, so I go off now. At this part, the trees are a lot thicker than before, and that was a bit more reassuring. But that lake, I'm constantly hearing sounds from over where that lake is, and I just cannot for the life of me figure out what they are. I actually can't remember the sounds too well, and I don't know if it was because I was in a bit of a heightened state during the experience, but I just remember they were weird sounds, like scratching and things like that. Now I know it could have easily been a group of people on drugs or God knows what, but given the weather conditions, I think that's extremely unlikely. Again, this is something one of my incredible colleagues told me that that's what this could have been, and joking that it was green men and aliens, but I don't understand it, because again, these people are so interested to hear what I was saying, and maybe they're denying it because they're scared of what I'm telling them, or just refuse to believe it, but that annoyed me. And I've always been somebody who has the ability to break down the physics of things. If something has happened, I don't immediately go to the irrational explanation. I think with a scientific mind, but it failed me this day, because I can't come up with much for what was happening to me. Now I continue on as the snow gets a little bit thicker now. I think the reason for this might have been because there weren't as many thin trees blocking out all of the snow to capture it, just quite a few big ones with more space in between, but it did actually make my legs hurt. I noticed my knees are quite cold, so my remedy for this is once again to pick up the pace. I clear some of the snow that's actually settled on me, and I actually feel a bit better now. There's quite a big drop off down to the lake now, and I realise that I'm going uphill. What was weird though is that I haven't been to this area before, and I can't really find it. Even since I've been back to the forest again, I've never been able to find this exact spot. Now, it was like somebody had described the area that I was in to somebody else, and they'd tried to make it but not done it exactly the same, and you kind of know deep down that you're not in exactly the same place, but there's enough familiarity for you to feel confident in the situation. Now, as I get closer to the light that I could see, I realise that this definitely isn't the moonlight, because it was kind of flickering like it had an electrical energy to it, and was kind of flashing around into the clouds a little bit, not like lightning, but kind of like the northern lights, and that was what I find really bizarre. Just the whole energy of whatever this was is like nothing that I've ever seen before. A little bit scared now, I start to slowly pan around trying to see anything, but I can't find a thing. Every so often I hear sounds of movement behind me, but I can't be sure what this is. I decide that I just need to keep it moving, and that was one of the things that made me feel more safe in this situation now. I eventually come up onto the bend and I start approaching towards where the light is directly now. Now again, I'm not too scared or shy of adventures, so I have to keep pressing forward one step at a time. I do notice something odd, and that's that there aren't any steps up here. I know people might not have gone here in the daytime, but it does seem weird because there was just so many earlier that I'd seen pretty much everywhere. The snow had actually slowed down a little bit, and it wasn't as abrasive on my face, and this was quite nice. My nose and toes always seem to suffer, especially in the cold, along with my hands. I think I have a problem where they don't have very good blood, or they just seem to switch off in the cold, but it made the going a little bit tough and less comfortable. Now, had I found the ghost that I was looking for? Not just yet. So I decide that I need to go towards the light, but again, the way that the light is kind of bouncing off the clouds, almost like it's the northern lights, was just really strange. I was incredibly drawn into this, almost like I was looking at a hypnotist's watch. It was incredibly beautiful, but just really weird. I didn't know if it was related to an electrical storm, but it wouldn't really make sense for me. I have seen something bizarre while working on the service, so again, a little bit similar to this. I remembered one time that I was working. I was actually in the station and I just made myself a coffee. I went to step outside and had a look around at the sky at night just because it's so beautiful, and I do notice something odd. There's almost like a large blue electrical ball of light in the sky. It's opaque and not really visible, and it only lasted for a few seconds, but it's like nothing I've ever seen before. A few of my colleagues had actually reported seeing it as well while on duty at the exact same time that I did, and this kind of had the same characteristics, but it wasn't identical. But I want to find out what this is, and I wasn't as scared as I was before. Now the closer I get, there's something else I notice which is pretty bizarre, and that's that the sky seems to be kind of imitating this very loosely. It's almost like somebody turned on a pulse of electricity through the clouds above me. It's almost like the northern lights are above the whole sky now, but extremely faint, but the same colour as the clouds, so again it's almost like they were pulsating a bit. I did get scared because there's a eye condition that someone in my family has, which is actually a little bit similar to this, but I've been tested for it multiple times since and after this event, and it's always come up clear. But in the moment I was pretty scared because I really worry about having issues with my vision. Now, luckily it turned out it wasn't my eyes, and I quickly did some tests by looking at the ground and things that weren't moving to realise that nothing was off. But why was the sky moving? I wasn't so sure what was happening, but I wasn't that far away now from where I needed to be. That's when I noticed another wooden structure. It's similar to what I've seen before, but it kind of formed more of a hexagon type of shape. Every so often I would see these on either sides of the trail, and they seemed to be increasing in frequency as I got closer to the light. I only saw about 3 more of them, but again, never seen it since. I stop for a moment, and I can see my breath on my light as I take my mask down just to try and get a better feel of what was happening. I shine the torch around, but again, I don't see much of anything. Don't know what I was expecting to see. I've just got the glow dead ahead of me now, and I know I have to get there. It's not much longer now before I'm there, so at least I've got that to look forward to, and I can eventually start heading back. I'm not sure how far I'd actually come at this point, but I've probably been walking for about a good 50 or 60 minutes. It doesn't sound like much, but usually you'll feel it more than I was in this situation, because walking in the snow is actually really difficult sometimes, and the cold can kind of zap out all of your energy. Now, I'm not too far away from where this is, and I can hear the voices again. It sounds like whispering. I can make out the odd word or two, but nothing seems to be in a language that I understand. It's definitely in a language though, and it hasn't increased in volume or anything since when I first heard it earlier. I don't know if it was there the whole time because I kind of just zoned out to it, but I suddenly noticed it much more than I had done earlier. And again, this is pretty weird to me because, like I said, I've never heard anything like it, and it was a bit creepy. Now, I eventually come up to the last clearing where the light should be, and I'm quite excited to get here. There seems to be lots of footsteps here everywhere, so I'm pretty convinced that I've made it back onto the main path now. I've got a good feeling now, and I know that there must be somebody there, so I feel pretty happy. So, what do? Take my steps around it. I can definitely hear the voices on the right side of me now, and I keep stopping every couple of seconds to approximate exactly where it is. Every so often I see movement up ahead of me, and I'm convinced that it's people out here now, so I feel much more relaxed and reassured. I'm now going down the last straight part that I have to go to, with the trees kind of forming an arch above me, and the snow still everywhere around me. Now some people have asked me why did I keep going and what was I actually doing out there. That was my friends at work earlier, and I don't know. I guess it kind of felt like I'd been there for too long and I was at least going to get something out of it, and yeah. So I continue up and I eventually find where the clearing is, and I realise that I've only got about another 20 feet of a walk to figure out what this is, and I can see movement again. I decide that the best thing to do in this situation is just to slowly sneak up on who or whatever it is up ahead of me. Now yes, I've got them I think. I can see some more lights ahead too. I'd see 2, then 3, then they go out. I don't have my light on at this point because I want the element of surprise. The snow is coming against me, but not directly in my face, so this is pretty pleasant. Now, I come up to where I can hear the voices finally getting louder and louder, and my excitement is growing. It feels like I've been here for too long trying to figure out what is actually going on, and I'm gonna get my taste of it soon. I am kind of looking over my shoulder every so often though, because I do hear sounds like I'm being followed. Again, I keep thinking I'm seeing movement, but there's not much of anything when I focus, so I try not to think of it. I don't actually have my torch on now, so I can't verify the fact that there's nothing there. But again, I just presumed it was people. And I thought, well, they haven't said anything to me, and I'm not disturbing them, so why are they going to be annoyed at me? It was almost like an overconfidence, and eventually, I come up to the tree line and the clearing. I start going a lot slower now as I get closer and closer to where I can hear them all. Now the chanting is still illegible, and I take my first step up, and I look around and I can see what must be hundreds of people all standing around the edge of some kind of clearing. They've all got their hands raised up and they're making some weird chanting sound. Now they're not actually that close to me, so it's pretty difficult to make out how tall they are, but these things seem really small. I say things because I don't know if they were people unless they were on their knees, but that's what it looked like. I start to shake a little bit as I feel a lot more like I'm in danger now. I decide that I'm gonna slowly turn my flashlight on for a second and figure out what this actually is. My eyes adjust more and more to the darkness every couple of seconds, and I notice something wrong. They don't look like normal people. The shape of them's all wrong and their arms are too long, and they're all either wearing some white things on their arms, but it looks very pointy, just like the things I'd seen earlier. I try as best I can to slowly flicker on the torch, but I cannot do it. Again, I start shaking more and more and try and press it, but nothing happens. I keep on and on flicking until eventually it flashes on, and for a split second I can see these things. They're like very dark small creatures with weird pointy arms, all facing up to the sky making some weird sounds. Their mouths are what really scare me. It's like just a circle with lots of jagged teeth. And just as I'm taking this all in, they suddenly vanish, and so does the sounds. I quickly fire the torch around everywhere trying to see where they've gone, but I can't see anything. I can hear my heartbeat in my ears like a constant rhythmic drum. And then, a few moments later, I hear movement, rustling and the sounds as though hundreds of people are all coming towards me suddenly, and I take off. I turn my torch on and quickly dart up ahead of myself, constantly looking over my shoulder with the torch. What I have just seen, I don't know, but I knew that I was in danger and had to get out of there. Luckily, I can retrace my footprints for most of the journey until I get away from the clearing. I can hear the sounds are still coming after me, just much slower than me, but they're still coming. I stop for a second and fire the torch around everywhere but can't see anything, and I drop it. Now, I managed to drop it not only into the snow, but face first, and that also means there's no light illuminating back at me, it's kind of buried. Just as I say to myself, you've got to be kidding me, I can hear something else not far up ahead of me. So I take off. Thank God I actually brought the other torch with me, because I'm absolutely certain at the fact that I would have had cardiac arrest otherwise. Now, the only problem I've got is the other torch isn't that easily accessible right now. I put it away when I was trying to hide and be not heard, but now I'm starting to think that wasn't really a good idea. And because I've had this on and so close to my face, I haven't really adjusted to the dark, and I don't know where I'm going. I used to be quite good at long distance cross country, so I have that in my favour. But I soon realise those years are way behind me, and I come up to a point where there's two paths. One's much smaller and seems untrodden but should be closer to where I need to get to. The other is what seems to be closer to where the light is, and I have to choose the latter. Now I take off down this path, and I keep fumbling trying to get the other torch on, but for whatever reason I just can't seem to do it. I don't know if it was for the fact that it was in the cold for too long, but in those moments it just would not come back to life again, and I'm just hitting it on my palm constantly. Now it's extremely difficult to navigate in this moment. I think I know where I'm going, but I can't really tell. There's clearly lots and lots of different footprints on this path, and I can't tell if they're normal or not because I was rushing so much, but it gives me some reassurance that I must be going in a relatively good direction to escape whatever this is. Now I should mention at this point that the sounds are long gone. I'd absolutely blitzed something that seemed like it couldn't go much quicker than a light walking pace, but it didn't matter. I don't know what was chasing me or why. I don't know what I'd just disturbed. Eventually, I flick my torch on again, and I illuminate the rest of the way back. I turn it off again quickly because I'm not sure how good the battery is and I really needed to conserve it. I stop for a few moments to collect my breath and look around me, and I think I know my bearings now, and I start to walk. The only reason that I had to walk now is because I was so out of breath and exhausted from moving in the snow that I genuinely was going to have to crawl the rest of the way out otherwise. I now make it up to another clearing where I can see the lake. I look around everywhere, and what's really weird, I can't see the light glow that I saw earlier. It's genuinely nowhere. I was convinced that I should still at least be able to see that out of all things, but there's literally nothing. I don't get it. And the sky, it still didn't look right, but it wasn't like before. So where did the light go? I didn't have much time to focus on it, but I was truly perplexed, and this is something that I still think about now. I managed to get my torch on again, and I don't know, it sounds stupid, but I was trying to recharge whatever energy it was and fire it around everywhere, hoping to see the light again, just to know it was there. But again, I don't see anything. Now, I'm pretty spooked out now, but I have to keep going. I eventually make it into a more familiar area, and I'm actually feeling confident finally. I've adopted more of a walking pace because I was a little bit worried that if anyone was out there and I ran up on them, they might think I was trying to attack them. I do stop constantly though, and look around, desperately trying to see something or anything around me, but again, I can't see anything or anyone. I was desperately hoping that I'd see a group of people just to explain what I'd seen, or at least to be able to tell somebody, but I can't see anything. The snow's picked up a little bit more now, and it wasn't pleasant. I realised too that I must have been out of here for quite a long while because the battery's virtually entirely drained on the torch. I know because it's gone pretty dim. I probably have the worst torch in the world because when the battery's low it goes really dim to conserve it, but it doesn't last very long, so what's the point? The other light that I have is far superior, but that's long gone. I decide to leave it for whatever's out there to enjoy it. I know I'm never seeing that thing again. I'm someone who usually hates losing things too, but I was so scared I didn't even think about trying to recover it. Now, the trees are getting thinner and thinner, and that gives me a pretty good idea that I'm not too far away from where I need to be now. I can't be 100% certain that I'm back to safety, but this is a pretty good indicator of it being the case. Now, I continue this walking pace, and I'm constantly looking behind myself. Now, momentarily, I start shaking again and don't know why. Then suddenly, I realise I hear something making a screeching sound. It's kind of at a medium volume, but it sounds like it's coming from exactly behind where I was. I'm not so worried now because with a few steps, I'm eventually back to where the forest ends, and I'm not too far from safety. I look around for anything to have been following me, but I can't see anything, and I quickly make my way over to my car. I start it up, turn the lights on full, and take one last look into the forest, and I can't see anything. I get back into my car and drive the rest of the way home, completely in shock about the whole experience. Now, I really don't know what happened to me that day, and I truly don't like sharing my story with colleagues at work because they don't really listen to me, but I know what I saw, and I don't know what it was. It could have been spiritual, it could have been anything, but I sure as hell don't have a clue what that was, and that scares me. Now, many years ago, my grandpa told me a story, and it's something that I've never been able to forget. My grandpa worked as a forest worker for quite a while. He would basically have to survey the area every so often and just try and keep it in its tip-top condition. It was a really beautiful place that he worked in. Now, I'd always remember this story that he told me again and again over different years. It was impossible to forget. Now, unfortunately, my grandpa passed away not too long ago. Now, one thing that I absolutely didn't realise is that he had an entire written account of everything that he had told me in his own words. So now today, I'd like to share this story with you. Now, I'd like to give you some backstory about my grandpa first before I actually start. Now, he was someone who was a very good, hard-working, honest guy. You'd never have any issues with him. I mean, if you ever heard that he was in an argument or something, then you knew for absolute certain that the other guy was probably in the wrong. He's just that kind of person. I mean, virtually everybody knew him. He also had this fantastic ability to remain completely calm and not panic in different situations. There's a lot of different characteristics of which he had that I now possess myself, and that I'm grateful for being able to watch him have and to be able to then eventually implement myself. I mean, really, I don't think I was half the man that he was at my best, but I tried to be, but even half is enough. Now, my grandpa was also somebody that would absolutely never lie. He just didn't have it in him. I mean, in any situation, he just wouldn't lie about things. It's just not the kind of person that he was. He lived some life too. He was actually drafted into parts of different wars, and it must have been difficult for him. He never actually told us exactly what happened during the wars. I just knew that it had an impact on him. And now, this story actually occurred to him before the wars too, so that puts out any doubt that it was related to PTSD or something from them. I do feel sorry for him though. I've been lucky enough to live a life where I've never had to be drafted or have anything like that happen to me so far. So now let me begin. Now, growing up in the same area and remaining there virtually his whole life, my grandpa eventually come to inherit a family home, and it's one that he'd always been on, so he didn't really know much different from it. So I'll now take the story from him and tell you exactly what he had wrote down. The first time this happened was when I was quite young. I don't know exactly how old I was, but I remembered that all throughout our villages there were reports of something strange in the forest. Apparently, people would wake up and hear scratching or knocking on the windows, then go outside and not see anything. You know, something else weird was there was all kinds of lights in the sky not too long after this would happen. A lot of us thought it was the apostles or God coming down to make us all repent for our sins or something. A lot of people were highly religious, but I wasn't myself, so it didn't bother me too much. Now, I remember coming home from school one day, and I had a long walk to get back. I had to go through different parts of the forest, and I was doing so with my friend Neil at the time. Neil was a good friend. We went to our first school together, and then our second one. We were kind of troublemakers every so often. We actually got kicked out of the first one for fighting within the space of a month of each other. But I guess our paths were supposed to cross again, because what you know, we ended up seeing each other again and our paths crossed. So we've always taken this walk back, and it was quite good just to have a talk about things. We would seemingly never run out of different things to speak to each other about, and that made it really good. I remembered that on this particular day, it was honestly exceptionally cold. I mean, far more cold than I'd realised it had been at any other time, and it didn't feel very nice. It just kind of sucked walking home. I mean, cars weren't really a thing as much back then, so that wasn't an option. My family didn't have much money, so obviously that was out of the question, but it meant more bonding time for me and my buddy. So we get to walking, and my buddy constantly looks behind himself. I start making fun of him and touching the other side of his shoulder, causing him to turn round and jump at times. He says, "Come on, knock it off." I say what's wrong, and he says, "I just feel like there's something here." I started laughing at him, saying, "Yeah, watch out, we're never going to be found again." He says, "No, knock it off." And we keep walking. Now, as we're walking, we do notice something very strange. Up in the sky, there's some kind of spinning object. It looks like a silver pan or something, just floating there. And it's got some lights on it too. I don't know what kind of lights they are, but they kind of glow like it's from a bushfire or something. And there's different colours, which is weird. I've never seen a bushfire like this. It's orange and purple and green. Maybe it's some kind of chemical that we hadn't learnt about. We start to think maybe it's something from our government. We're just really confused and just stood there for a while. Now, after standing there for probably about 20 minutes, we decide to keep moving. The only reason for that though really is because of how cold we both feel now. We know that we have to keep on going, but that thing doesn't move. Weirdly, we see it starting to drop down slowly further and further into the tree line. Now the good thing is, on this part of the walk we're actually going downhill, so it's now going to be a lot easier for us to just get to wherever this thing is, and that's what we decide to do. It's kind of close to some water, but lands just off in the ridgeline. I start to get a little bit shaken up now and tell Neil that we shouldn't investigate, and he says, "You know what, you're right. But we have to keep on heading in this direction anyway." It seems like the further downhill we go, the more confident that we both become that we're going to be able to actually be alright if we investigate whatever this is. So now, I continue on with my friend, and we're both getting more and more confident, until eventually, he says it, "Come on man, let's just go." I say, "Yeah, let's do it." And we start walking towards this thing. There was also a smell. It kind of smelled like lead or copper. I don't know what it is. Or maybe some coins, but there was definitely something in the air. I actually think that I've got a nosebleed, and I go to touch my face, but my buddy says, "Yeah, I've got the same thing." Weirdly, I did actually pick up a nosebleed not too long after, and my friend did too, which is really weird. We can never tell exactly if it was because of our noses bleeding or what. We thought maybe it was a cold, but it was weird. It was like there was a smell of metal long before the actual blood come, which was really strange. But we keep on going anyway. We're probably walking blindly into danger, but we're just curious as to what this is. Now we walk for quite a long time, and we honestly don't ever seem to be getting any closer to this, and we're both getting frustrated. We've kind of walked a bit further than we're supposed to now, trying to find this thing, and it's starting to get a little bit more dark. It's cold, and while walking through the trees, now off of the path, I actually got all moss and stuff stuck on my hands, and I really hate that stuff. I spend a while trying to brush it off myself, but my friend stops me and says, "Hey look, I see it." I say, "What'd you see?" and he doesn't say anything. I'm kind of annoyed actually, because I really can't see a thing, but he says, "No, look." And there we can see it, just for maybe 1 or 2 seconds. There's something in the sky, not too far from where we're standing, and then there's a bright flash and this thing is gone. We stood there completely confused and baffled as to what just happened. It was like the thing just disappeared, and we start to think that we've scared it off somehow. It's a really odd experience, and I eventually go back with my friend and we forget about it. Now fast forward a few years, not much has happened since then, and that thing was long gone out of my mind. I had to work straight away after school had finished anyway, so I guess that I kind of got preoccupied with other things. But I was going through the same woods again. Now like I said, my family didn't have too much money. All of my money basically had to support the family, not get other things, and I didn't have an issue walking. Now one day I was walking home from work, just like any other day, excited for supper that my mum would have made for me. Now as I'm walking, I hear a strange sound. I really don't know how that I can describe it, other than like maybe something smashing up, like if you had a big strong hammer and it was metal, almost like you're trying to forge something. Maybe like the workers in the mill were used to, I don't know. And then, boom, an explosion. Now the shockwave made me jump, and then there's some kind of strange sound afterwards. It sounds like an animal, but not like one that I've ever heard of before. And I was curious, as I can see something smouldering not too far away. It was weird, and I really don't know what it was. So I start walking up now, trying to get to the exact source of whatever this is that's just crashed. For a second I think I see something and panic, but then I remember that I'm alone out here and I haven't seen anyone, so I start to settle down a bit. There was something that was kind of drawing me to this thing, kind of like the same feeling I had before that time with my buddy, just like there's something interesting out there and I've kind of got to go and figure out what it is. I don't know what it was exactly, and I don't know how to describe it, but I just had to go out there. Now this time it was raining a lot, and I couldn't move so quick. There was leaves and stuff all over the floor. I don't have anything to keep the rain off myself, but I wasn't too bothered. All of the trees are quite tall here, so it's really helping keep the water off me. So I just continue on. Now this part of the forest honestly closely resembled a jungle more than it did the area that I lived in. There was just so many trees and things everywhere that it made it hard to see up ahead. Now I'm walking and I realised that a tree really looks like the silhouette of somebody. It kind of resembled that of some kind of ape or something. I don't know. But I start walking further and I realise that it's just in my head. I think, gosh, there's definitely something up here. I just don't know exactly what it could be. As I get closer, it kind of looks like a knight almost, with some kind of cloak on or something. But it was just a tree. That's how thick and dense a forest is up here. I really can't see much of anything. Now I'm walking up and down these hills in kind of like big zigzag, weird patterns. It's the only way that you could go up it like you're a billy goat or something, so I keep doing so. This means that it's going to take a while before I find out what this is. I did think it was odd how that it was raining and it still seemed to be on fire potentially. And then I see it. It's kind of like a blue-purple hue, similar to what I've seen before. But I just can't place my finger on it. Why does this feel so familiar when I've clearly never seen this before? And then I realised that this is just like the colours of that thing I'd seen in the sky. The big pan with my friend before. I think no, it can't be. Surely this isn't the same thing that I saw all those years ago. But it seems to be. So I keep on going. This time I want to figure out what it is. I was a bit bigger now, so I felt like I didn't have so much to be scared of like I did when I was a bit younger. I mean, why not just figure this thing out? Why not just be the guy that managed to do something? So that's what I do. I keep on heading up there. It was weirdly quiet though. I've never heard the place so still. It was almost like, you know when one of the big predators comes and everything else stops? Yeah, it was just like that. I only had that experience a few other times while hunting out with me old man. But it's something I hadn't had for a long while, so it definitely felt odd. Now I get closer, and I can hear something. It almost sounded like somebody rang a bell and put it right next to my head just to annoy me. Now it seems like the further I walk, the more it goes on. It was quite high in its tone, and I wondered whether there was actually something here if I just knocked my head or something. You know, like if you get hit really hard, you can have like a ringing in your ears, like the bell sound. Well, it's kind of similar to that, but just different. Now it doesn't stop, but eventually it's something that I become completely used to. It sounds like it's pressurized now, and I wonder what it is. I wonder if this thing, whatever it is that's exploded, is actually leaking some kind of gas in the air, and I wonder if it's going to explode like dynamite. Well, I better find out. And then I can see something odd. Further down up ahead of me, there's something glowing but moving. Whatever this thing is, it's a very bright green colour. It almost hurt my eyes to look at, which is really strange, and it looks like the fire's moving. Now this gone on for a little while, and it doesn't move much, until suddenly, it seems to be getting a little bit bigger and bigger. It's so bright that I can actually see it behind the trees now. Now that's when I can finally get a better look once my eyes have adjusted to how bright this thing is. It's not as bright as the sun, but it's probably double or triple a normal moonlight, so it's quite powerful. Then, I can make out more of it. It kind of looks like it's almost bulb shaped. The core is white and the outside is green. I'm really confused by what this is, and it then gets gradually closer and closer ever so slowly. I then realise that this thing is a little bit tall, taller than I am for sure. And it seems to be kind of crawling forwards. I can't see arms or anything, but it's definitely got a very pale coloured face, and it almost looks like it's smiling. It was really scary. That's when I stopped for even longer, trying to figure out if this is on its own or not. I don't see much else, so I try not to panic and just sit there waiting. After about 5 or so minutes have now passed, I now realise that this thing, whatever it is coming towards me, and it's high time that I turn around and get out of there. It looked crazy. It looked like it was out of a comic or something, the way that it was moving towards me. I could just see this burning stuff and some embers behind it, but it doesn't seem phased at all. And the sound, it hasn't stopped. So now, I decide that I've seen enough, and I start heading back in the direction that I've come from. I wasn't too bothered though. The only thing that's really bothering me is the fact that I've got shorts on. I don't know what that thing is. I don't think anybody's ever seen anything like it. Maybe it was the enemy had got here and invaded us or something, and they just put their weapon on us. I don't know. I was ready to join the military if it was needed, but that come later. So I just casually make my way back, and I still can't get the ringing out my ears. I ended up hitting my head a few times trying to see if I could dislodge it. I thought maybe it was water or something from a creek, I wasn't sure. But it doesn't really subside. It just seems to get gradually more and more quiet the further that I walk towards where I need to be. And I think, well, that will teach me for exploring when I shouldn't have. So eventually I get back home. Everything's normal for a couple of days, and I hear a few of the guys at work talking about it. They're like, hey, do you see that thing in the sky? Yeah, it was crazy. Don't know what it is. It's like one of those big helium balloon things. You know the things in the sky that are silver? But he says, no, this thing was different. I don't know what this was. I then say, guys, what are you talking about? And they say, didn't you hear about it? Everybody saw that thing in the sky that night, and it just kind of crashed, bang, hit the ground real hard. Now, I open my mouth to speak, and I decide to not speak in the last second. I thought, you know what, I don't want to be the town idiot. I've just got this job and I could lose it over something like this. So I say, that's really weird. The more I'm hearing him talk about it, the more I realise that whatever I saw was probably that. I was probably the closest that anybody ever got to whatever this thing is, and I don't know what it is. I didn't really want to tell my mum or dad too, or even my brother, because they're all quite religious and I know that they're going to take me to the church, and I already have to do that enough and I don't like it. To them it's probably some kind of monster or demon from the gates of hell coming to get me for not living a good life. But I don't know, I just can't be bothered with it. So I decide that, well, that was that, and I forgot about it. See, a lot was happening in my life, so I seemed to be forgetting about things quite quickly. But, as always, there was more to come. And this is where it gets a bit more weird. Now, not too much longer after that happened, my brother keeps on getting this recurring nightmare. He wasn't that young too, but he would wake up literally screaming in the night. It was really scary. I mean, we'd all rush in and say, what's wrong? And he'd say, look, there was something in the window. There was something in the window. We asked him to describe it and he said, well, it was all white, but kind of glowing green at the edges. He said it looked like a skeleton from the cemetery, but he couldn't be too sure because he was so scared. Now this happened a few times. I asked him, where did the head come up on your window? And he said, well, it come up pretty high. It would have made that thing about 8 feet tall. I thought, wow, this is actually really weird. I said to him, do you not think it's anybody holding up a lantern? He said, no, of course not, and hit me. We actually started almost a fight then, and then eventually my mum and dad broke it up, saying, come on, stop. He says, you know what, if you're so brave, then why don't you live there? Why don't you stay in my room and I'll stay in yours? I said, fine. I'm no coward like my brother is. I'm not going to play possum if I see something there. I'm ready to fight it. I've got a rifle too, so I can go take that thing down. Also, I've got myself a flashlight now. Yeah, what's that thing gonna do? So, I start to relax a bit more. So there I am, really confident, heading into my brother's room, not worried about a thing. Now this actually went on for a while because we ended up forgetting to go back to our subsequential rooms and just stayed there. I kind of made it my home. I mean, all my possessions are in the living room basically, so it didn't matter. And I just basically started bullying my brother about how much of a coward he was and how that he weren't half the man I was. So, taking up my offer, or should I say insult, he decides that he's going to go out there and look for it. He does this alone for a while, but eventually I decide to join him. I then decide to tell him about the things that I've seen before because he said to me, you know what, have you ever had anything weird happen? I say, well, yeah, a few things. As we're patrolling the perimeter of our property, we had to defend it too because this could have been anyone. So while doing so, I explain my story and he looks at me odd. He says, you know what, that thing you talk about kind of sounds like the thing that I had seen. I'm pretty doubtful that I've seen that. It's probably nothing, man. You're probably just tired. But he says, no, it was weird. Well, anyway, we head back in without finding much of anything, and I drift off to sleep. So then, I wake up to some kind of tapping sound. Don't know what it is, but it jolts me up as I suddenly realise my duty and what I'm doing. I quickly get up and grab the light. I don't turn it on, as I look around trying to see where did it come from. I can't see much of anything until then. I lock eyes or faces with something. It's that glowing thingy again. That demon, it's there. I say, God, what's that? I say, hey, and I turn on the flashlight, and for some reason, the second the beam hit this thing's face, it kind of starts to run off. I could actually see where it was going because for a little while afterwards, in each step, there was some kind of glowing stuff which was green on the floor. I say, come on. I go to rouse up my brother, but he's too tired for this. And he's trying to get up quickly, but I say, come on, follow me. As I grab my rifle and some tape and my light, and I quickly tape this onto the rifle so I can see what I'm doing and shoot. I think I'm going to get me this kill. I've had enough of this, and I've decided that I'm going to go for it and start hunting it. Wow, this thing moved fast. Boy, I don't even know if I can keep up with it. I quickly follow where I can see the glowing embery things on the floor. It's more like goo the closer I get to it. It probably lasts for about a minute, but it's just enough to leave a trail to figure out where I'm going. The weirdest thing ever is that maybe it caught on fire, or I don't know. Every time that my torch actually goes over to this thing, or where it was, it kind of glows, which is really weird. I don't know if it's starting to set alight or what it is. They're not candles and they're not torches themselves, so I don't know what it is. But I can't figure out where this thing is. I ended up realising that my brother's come behind me and I almost shot him. It'd probably have been a good thing some days, but I scream at him. I was like, why didn't you tell me you're coming? He says, relax, just go. And we constantly follow this thing. My brother's got himself a pan, I don't know why. He's ready to whack that thing over the head, and so am I. And we start chasing even more. That's when we round a corner and we can see it. That thing's just sitting there. It's crouched down like it's injured. I scream out to it, who are you? What are you doing on our land? And I let off a shot close to its head. That's when that thing stood up. With every inch it grew in height, I start to tremble a bit more. That thing was massive. It was almost as big as one of the little trees we have on our yard. It was about 8.5 feet tall. It turned around, still glowing not very much, and that's when I hear a whistle sound. Well, I was so scared that I actually dropped the rifle and start sprinting with my brother in complete synchrony, and we start running back the way that we come, with our actual path still guided by the glowing embers of whatever that thing left on the ground. I can hear it, my brother screams as we realise that this thing has started chasing us. My brother starts tearing up. I say, come on, snap out of it. And I start screaming for my dad. We eventually get back into the house and slam the door behind us. And somehow my dad was asleep still, but my mum wakes him up. We say, there's something out there. It's got the gun. It's got the gun. My dad quickly breaks out his shotgun, and all three of us head out now. Maybe it was like the tribe mentality, but I felt a lot more confident now, and so did my brother. And we actually start running towards where that we'd seen it. But we get there, and we can see the glow of my torch and my rifle. I say, yes, this is it. We had a look round everywhere, but can't see a thing. I then hesitantly and slowly start going further towards it. Then I'm able to pick up my rifle and just pan the torch around. But again, I can't see a thing. We ended up staying out there for probably another good hour or two, until eventually my dad says, alright boys, let's head back. Must have scared him off, whoever it was. And I say, but Dad, this wasn't a person, this was a thing. My brother goes, yeah, it wasn't. He says, come on, that's enough now, and let's head back. And that was the last that I ever saw of it. Still don't know what it was, or if it was somebody out there messing with us, but it seems a bit far-fetched to me. I've never seen it since, but I'm always left wondering, am I going to encounter it again, and will I be alone like the other time? I hope not. In May 1985, my friend and I were returning to the United States after we had spent a week wandering and camping in Canada. We are both female. Being 20 years old, we had scarce any money, and we had just spent the last of it on gas, so we needed to make it home. We drove into the night late. By 1 AM we have a few more hours left. We were travelling south on Route 84 to Illinois. My friend was driving and we're having a great time. We chatted up a storm as we made our way down the little 2-lane highway. It's probably a scenic road by day, but at night everything is pitch black. Suddenly, a shape appeared at the very edge of our headlights. It looked like a log was laying on the opposite lane. As we get closer, the log turns out to be the legs of a man sitting on the highway. As we got even closer, we could see that the man was sitting on the solid white line of the opposite lane, legs just sitting there out on the highway like he's waiting for cars to come. We slowed down, swerving towards him. We said a few things like, I wonder if he needs help, why is he laying there? The headlights completely illuminate him as we drive towards him. He sat face down on the opposite side of the road, so we were looking at him in profile. He's wearing a brown suit, brown shoes and a brown hat. His arms hung down by his side. At first he didn't even acknowledge us or move in any way. We just stare at him in silence. Suddenly though, he jerked his face towards us. His eyes were glowing red, his mouth open and twisted in a snarl. We were completely terrified. I should mention that, to my friend's credit, she doesn't panic and actually swerves out of the way, reacting very quickly, punching the gas, making a getaway. As we've actually sped away, we both turned to have a look at the face out the back of the window, but we can't see too well in the darkness. But I couldn't shake the feeling of the wrongness, like we stumbled across something we weren't supposed to see. It looked like a person, but those eyes were glowing and not human. Now, today I'd like to share my story that happened quite a number of years ago, though the feelings have never really left me. I'm somebody who spent a lot of time working out in nature. I was a park ranger, so I'd always done things outside. I mean, not just while I was at work, but for other reasons too. I remembered I had some friends that were really begging me to go out to the desert with them. I had this best friend called John, and he was the one who was the most up for it. He kept on telling me about all of these crazy experiences that he had out in this particular area of the desert. He said that he would see these people, well, he kind of describes them as some kind of beings or something, and I don't know, it was linked to UFOs and things, and I'm actually sure that I saw a UFO once. I was on top of one of our towers that you use for lookouts, and I saw a light in the sky that almost appeared red then purple, then suddenly split off in 4 different directions with different sections of it going the different ways. So yeah, I was kind of up for this. I was a little skeptical. I mean, even though I'd seen a UFO, I didn't really trust my eyes. And being out there and being so bored at times, I guess your mind plays tricks on you. But this friend John kept on and on going on about it, and eventually I decided to agree. He said it was kind of like a spiritual place that you could go to, and pretty much you'd be able to talk through all of your problems with these beings and that everything would be okay. Now, don't ask me why I actually agreed to do this. I don't know, I guess I wasn't thinking at the time. I'm not someone who really gives into peer pressure too. He'd actually been going on about this for ages, and I don't know, I felt bad for always saying no, so we set out on one particular day. We parked up and made sure that we have all of our water with us, and we set off. Now, we had some camping gear with us, so we're going to be okay as long as the water didn't run too low. We decided that we'd never go far from where we parked, so that way we can always go back and get more supplies if we really need them. So with that, off we went. Now, the first area that we're going in, you can see lots of different tire tracks, and apparently according to John this wasn't good because it meant other people would be around, but he told me not to worry too much about this. The area that we're in is actually pretty nice. We're kind of flanked by hills, and there's kind of like a mountainy part up ahead of us. It looks really cool though, to be honest. And we continue on our hike. Now, John's actually a really good friend, and he's genuinely one of the only people that actually understands me and is very similar with me in life. We have had a few arguments, but just over silly things, and I guess this guy was more of a brother than my actual brother to me at times. Now, that meant we would talk about everything. Often it was about relationships and other things that had went wrong in our lives before, and the more we spoke, I guess the more that we realised we're similar. And again, I didn't actually know just how similar we were. I mean, heck, It was pretty unbelievable, but I won't share too many details here about that, just because it kind of goes into some of the darkness that we both seem to experience somehow at the same time, almost living opposite lives, but parallel emotionally. So we talk through everything, and he says that we're not too far from where we need to get to, and that's when we encounter the first group of people. Now, they do seem a little bit weird at first. John also seems a little bit hesitant, but he ends up going up to them and starts talking. It turns out that they're here for the same reason, and although they seem a little bit weird, we decide to try and talk to them. I wasn't sure if one of them was on something, but he just seemed too talkative. They tell us that they've got something they want us to drink, and apparently they made some nice bush tea for us. Who was I to say no, and I end up drinking it. We exchange a couple of snacks, and it was actually a really good time. Now, we'd been with these guys for quite a while and eventually decided that it's time to leave them and go on. Now, we continue on our way, and you can actually see that the path is marked by different rocks that people have put there, so we know that we're not going anywhere too dangerous or anything. My friend John constantly reminds me to drink lots of water, and I keep doing so. I seem to get a headache now, which I really can't fend off for some reason. I have pretty sensitive eyes though. I can't even look at the ground when it's bright without sunglasses, without my eyes being strained. I also get this weird thing where I kind of see like flashy lights or something, but I know what it is. It's not a migraine, but I guess it's just my eyes going weird. Sometimes I'll see a strange bright colour too, but I guess that doesn't matter too much. We come up to one part of the hike where there's quite a big drop on the left hand side of us. If we're going to fall now, we're going to be in trouble, so we really try our best to avoid this. My friend then says that we haven't got too much further to go before we get to the people, and that's when we encounter some rangers. That's really odd, I think. There shouldn't be any rangers up here whatsoever. I don't know what they're doing, and we just say hi and don't really think much of it and just keep going. They seem a little odd, but I wasn't paying too much attention. That's when my buddy John says, "Did you notice something?" I say, "No, what's that?" He says, "Well, those guys looked almost exactly the same as each other, and I don't know, something just felt really off about them." I didn't really notice it, but trying to think of it, it almost felt like they didn't have much of a facial expression, almost like they were wearing a rubber mask, but I can't really tell. They eventually go off a little bit further, and we don't think too much of it as they slowly go out of sight. I then explain that I've heard about some twins who become park rangers in an area not far from where I was working at the time, and that, yeah, it's just basically a normal thing that you will get stuff like this. You know, you get families who are raised in the outdoors like me, and that's what the families want to do, jobs like ours. And my buddy John tells me not to worry too much and makes a joke out of it. And I tell him, hey, I'm not the one worried here. And we press on. Now my friend keeps on talking to me about this thing and how great it's going to be. And eventually we set up the tents. We do this, and I keep on slamming my water. One thing that's weird is that I haven't really had the urge to urinate too much yet. Usually I'll be going like every 10 seconds almost, but I don't really feel the urge to. I guess it was hot, but the weird thing is it's not really too hot now. There's kind of an overcast in the clouds, and it means that it's not really warm, it's actually a little bit cold. But John says, hey, come on man, we've got to go up to this before sundown, because this hill is where you're going to see it. Now I was either convinced that he was just off his head, or there were actually aliens here. We're nowhere near Roswell, so it wasn't anything like that, but I don't know, I've given him the benefit of the doubt. Talking to this friend though was honestly like a therapy in itself. It was almost like the ideas that I had, my friend could give me, and the ideas that he had, he could give me, and it would kind of complete each other. Not in a weird way, but just kind of like a nice bond and friendship. So yeah, it's getting a little bit dark, and I keep telling my buddy that we have to remember where the tent is because we're not going to see it. My friend doesn't take much notice of me and keeps on going. Now, He says that he's going to continue on, but I say that I feel like I need to stop for a bit. I don't know why, but suddenly the headache becomes absolutely overwhelming. Now, my friend continues on and I just let him go. Now, I feel extremely tired suddenly and I don't want to sleep, but you know when you try and lay on your side and not sleep, you know what happens? Yeah, you end up sleeping. Now, that was exactly what happened to me. I managed to wake myself up a couple of times, but I kind of drift off again. It's almost like I've got an alarm clock in my head, but I permanently had it on snooze and I wake up again. When I woke up, I felt like I'd slept for ages and almost like I'd had the best night's sleep of my life, but everything felt different now. I get up and look at the sky and it's kind of got like an orange hue to it, and I continue on the trail and try and find where my friend is. For some reason when I wake up, I suddenly feel much more peaceful. I wasn't concerned about finding my friend and I presumed that he just left me there to sleep and went back to the tent, so I decided to go on myself. I drank quite a lot of water again and I was actually running out in my first tank, which is surprising. Again, no urge to urinate, which I think is really weird, but I keep going. Now as I'm walking, I can hear a strange humming. It was almost like a kind of energy is the best way I can describe it. I wasn't entirely sure what it was, but I knew I should keep going and I thought maybe, just maybe, this is what John was telling me about. And I thought in the back of my head, maybe this is him up here making those sounds. I decided to continue and I make it a bit further now. The guy's actually quite tough here and the terrain's quite rocky now. I'm not too happy about this because I keep on whacking my shins when I'm trying to go up this thing. And also I keep getting little branches and things that are cutting up my ankles. But for some reason I'm not too bothered by this, and that's weird too because usually I'm really worried. As I get higher and higher up, I realise something weird now. I seem to be talking to myself in my head kind of far too much. It's quite weird. It goes from very positive to suddenly very negative, and it keeps on switching between the two. And that's when I realise that something's different about the sky. The colours seem off and the sky just seems far too bright. Now, I think this is really bizarre, but nothing too much to worry about. Again, I wasn't really thinking straight at this time. Now, I end up just walking and walking and I don't necessarily have a destination in mind. I don't know how far I was gone for, but I see my buddy up ahead of me. At least I think it's John. I say, John, John, and he keeps on walking and rounds a corner. I think, God, you're such an idiot. My foot was starting to hurt now and I can't be bothered to walk quicker, but I practically force myself to power up towards him. I eventually make it there and I realise something strange. He's just vanished. I try and figure out where that he's actually gone to and I walk up the hill and look over it, and there he is again. John, John, I scream out, but he doesn't listen. What's weird is that he just keeps on and on walking, but he seems to be far too far away from me. Even if he sprinted down this hill, he shouldn't have been able to get this far, and I suddenly realise that I can't see him any longer. I think this is odd and I look around, and suddenly I've realised that there's a few more people around. There's quite a lot up on a ridge and they're all waving at me trying to get me to come over to them. I can see that they brought some kind of dirt bike with them and I put my hand on it, but I decide to leave it because it's theirs. I think that this is a group that we've seen earlier, so I start to go further and further. And my God, do I have a bad migraine or something because my eyes are going a bit funny. I'm kind of seeing the weird colours again, but my vision's definitely a bit off now. I try not to think too much of it, and I reach down and realise that there's all water over my hand. I quickly start slapping around trying to figure out where the source of it's from, and notice how cold my hand is, when I realise that suddenly my hand isn't wet and it's in my head. I'm not aware that something's off at this point, and I just thought it was lucky that there's no water here. I then open up my bag and start drinking, and I realise that the heavens have opened up now. There's rain falling all around me, and it feels quite nice to be out of the desert sun. Now, I eventually make it up to the hill where all the people are waving, and it seems like they're being very friendly to me, saying good things and encouraging me. I stop to get a bit of breath and rest my legs for a few moments, and I say, "Hey guys, wait for me, I won't be long." And that's when I realise that my vision's gone a bit weird. It almost feels like I'm going backwards now, but I'm not. I take a few deep breaths and I become very, very conscious of my breathing and the rain around me. This calms me a lot, and I think the deep breathing did me some good. And I'll continue on and make sure that I can see my new friends at the top of the hill. There seems to be less and less of them now, and I eventually make it all the way up there. Now when I get to the very top, suddenly something changes. It's almost like they've all just appeared around me suddenly, but as I look at them, their faces seem off, and I suddenly notice that there's something very inhuman about them. Now, their faces look much more scary, and suddenly they morph into some kind of dark figures which tower over me. I mean, it starts off with about my height until they're about 2 or 3 times taller, and suddenly they surround me. But for whatever reason, I don't feel afraid and I don't feel scared of anything. I kind of notice that they're around me, and because I can't see now, I kind of lose my balance and fall over for a second. When I fall over, I'm staring back up at the sky now. I don't feel any pain or anything, but I can see lightning bolts all around me, and the rain picks up a lot more. I wipe my eyes trying to figure out what was happening when I eventually managed to get myself up off the ground again. I'm looking around and the figures are gone. I think, my god, did I encounter them? Was that it? What did I get out of this? Did I learn anything? Did I see anything? Are they actually there? And I think that this can't necessarily be anything that I actually believe's there. And I decide that I should keep looking for John. It suddenly clicks again. Now, that's when I start to get a bit scared. I have a sudden feeling of panic, and the more that I panic, the worse I feel, and I start picking up the pace more and more. And I start to see these beings again. These are different from the ones that I've seen earlier, and they seem a lot more malicious and malevolent. The further I go, the closer they seem to come towards me. It gets to a point where I honestly feel like there's an army of them behind me, and I don't dare look around. I'm not sure how long this went on for with this weird feeling of being followed, but my god, it must have been a long time. And I can tell you that I did not feel good during 1 second of it. I was trying to loop my way back round to where the tent should be, but to be honest, I had no idea of where I was going. Now, as you can imagine, this is incredibly dangerous out in the desert, especially if you're on your own, but I wasn't thinking of that. I remember eventually I was able to stop and turn around, and they're gone again. I look up in the sky for UFOs, and the stars seem to be too bright, and there seems to be too many of them. I wipe my eyes and it's rain again. I realise something's definitely off now. I start trying to hit my head, not hard, just enough to make sure I'm awake, but yes, I am. Now suddenly things seem to go straight back to normal. The raining stopped now, which I'm pretty happy about, and I continue now, but I'm no longer on the path. I'm going towards some kind of darker area now, where the sun seems to be far from me. I get here and I feel like I'm on a barren wasteland, and I call out for John. All I'm met with is echoes, and I'm convinced that he's back in the tent. I say, "John, you better be in that tent and I better find you there." And I start trying to go downhill now, and that's when I fall. I don't know how it happened, but I can only imagine that my foot got snagged on a rock, and I actually fall quite a bit down, tumbling. I fall asleep again, and now I wake up and John is prodding me. At least I think it's John. I say, "John, what are you doing?" confused as to who it is, and that's when I see it. One of the dark beings has found me, and there's a sea of stars behind him, and he takes me by my hand and lifts me up. Now, as he's lifting me up, I realise that I'm in some kind of different area again to where I thought I was. For some reason, this being seems a lot more friendly than the others, and seems to be guiding me away from wherever I was before. I look back and I can see the army of the others once again, and this thing just demands without saying anything that I look forward, and that's exactly what I do. Now, I keep going down pretty treacherous terrain, but this thing seems to be really helping me get through. Now, as weird as it sounds, I was pretty much having a full-on conversation with this thing in my head. It spoke in almost like a hushed tone, but kind of with more reverberation. It was like every time that it spoke, I would hear things and feel it through my body. I was asking where we were going and it said to safety, and I kept asking what's happening and it kept saying don't worry, don't worry. Now I'm not sure when it happened, but this being, whatever it is, left me, and it was up to me to continue the rest of the journey. I look around and it's much further away now, pointing, trying to usher me to go forwards, and I follow it. I'm now walking pretty close to some kind of crevasse or something. Almost like a very, very small Grand Canyon's probably the best way that I can describe it, but maybe not grand because of how small it is. Again, I'm going on a pretty sheer rock face, and how I don't fall at this point is beyond me. I know that my fall was definitely real though because of the blood on my white socks. Now, it doesn't take too much longer, and a miracle happens. I can see the tent, and it's where it should be, and I can see the silhouette of something or someone in it. Is it my friend? What is it, I think to myself. Now, I'm pretty much glued to the spot, and I realise that I've been asking myself this over and over again in my head for God knows how long, until eventually I decide that I've got to will myself forward, and it's almost like I've got to will one foot ahead of the other. I eventually make it there and open the tent, and John's there. I say, "John, what are you doing?" He says, "Hi, you're back. I was getting worried about you." I say, "What do you mean?" He said, "I thought you said you were going to come back soon and we're going to take a leak." I say, "I didn't say that. You were just going up the hill." And he looks at me very confused. I then tell him about the beings, and he tells me that he saw some too, but he wasn't sure what to think of it, because he was quite tired and thought it was a dream. He then tells me that he thinks what he saw was me, and called out, but I didn't reply, so he told me to meet me back at the tent, and he fell asleep. I decided not to tell him exactly what I'd seen, and I ended up crashing out. Now, I woke up again the next morning, and my god did I feel terrible. My body felt like absolute crud, and I decided the best thing to do is slam lots of water. I feel a lot better, and suddenly my heart starts pounding. Suddenly, all of my senses come flooding back to me, and the fear, this terrible fear of realising what had happened the night before, comes back to me. I let out a loud gasp and grab my friend John, who is still sleeping. I shake him awake, and it looks like he's just seen a ghost because of the way that I've awoken him. I then explain everything that happened to him, and that's when it hits us. Something was definitely off last night. I explain my story, and he then tells me his, and we weirdly both describe the beings as being almost exactly the same as each other, and we have this horrible feeling of dread, like something's really off. My friend John now realises that he definitely didn't understand what actually happened to me, and that it's weird because we have different stories of how we lost each other. We decide that we need to go back and make sure that we stay nice and hydrated because we're going to move quick, and we quickly pack up the things. Now, I can't describe to you the feeling of dread that I had when I packed up everything and I start heading back with John. I was absolutely convinced that it was paramount that we were about to be followed by those beings. Now, I have to tell you, in this moment, it was so real. What I'd seen and experienced is truly like nothing else I've ever seen on Earth before. And I don't know, in the moment I was kind of in this trance, so I just guess I went along with it. I remembered every time that I'd see a bush or tree that was darker than the rest, I almost had a mini heart attack. But I kept going. I didn't have a choice. The weird thing is too that the landscape all looked different from the way we'd come in. Luckily though, John knew the way, and eventually we make it back to the rocks which had been put there by others to mark the way. Now neither of us say anything. We're both very paranoid and constantly looking around, trying to see if there's anything there or any kind of explanation for what we'd just seen. We start talking a bit, and that's the more scared we get, the more we try and match up what had happened. Now, eventually we do make it back, and my god, getting back to being inside a vehicle was probably the best feeling in the world. I was actually so shaken up that I couldn't drive though, and I just had to lock the doors and just lay in the seat for a while, trying to think of what had happened. Had we been drugged? My buddy John then says that he thinks that we were probably drugged and that those guys probably spiked us with something that we ate or drank. He said it sounded like a weird drug that he had heard about before that can make you hallucinate, and apparently the plant for it and seeds are actually quite common in nature, and he thinks they probably got it from here and thought it'd be funny to do it and not tell us. I was convinced of the same thing because the whole thing just felt so weird. God, how could they be so evil to us? I mean, we literally could have died. We could have ended up like those hikers who went out into the wilderness and just disappeared. What really worried me is the fact that we got separated out here, completely out of our minds, both of us. Now, anything could have happened to me. I checked for bruises and I didn't have a headache or anything, but I could have easily hit my head and got brain bleeding or something. I don't know, it's just too easy to happen out here. But the thing that neither of us understand is, how do we get back? We both agree that we're probably miles away from each other at some point, because at the very least we should have heard each other screaming out, but we didn't hear a thing. And the rest of the drive back was a pretty weird one. This is when the both of us discovered that we had also seen the rain before, but the area around us didn't seem to be too wet. I mean, yeah, it is a desert, so it could have just evaporated, but I don't know. It just felt a little bit different somehow. And eventually we get back. Now we make it to John's mum's house, and John's mum says, God, you guys must have seen it. Surely you guys seen it. Tell me you did. It was right where you guys were staying. We look at each other very concerned. Was this the first that the beings had been actually reported or what? And his mum then says, did you see the UFO? I saw it. So many of our neighbours saw it. I say, what do you mean? Getting a little bit angry. She says, the UFO. So many of us saw it. Those weird flashing lights in the sky. It was almost like a big triangle with red glowing orbs under it. It went over to roughly where you guys were staying in the desert. Then a few more appeared, and it was there in the same place for about a good half an hour. My heart drops now. Apparently it was accompanied by a quick storm, and suddenly they just shot off, never to be seen again that night. Apparently hundreds of people had all seen the same thing, and the timeline pretty much matched up to when we got over there. Now, me and John looked at each other, and we went off into his room and sat down for a while. We made some tea, and just kind of stared at each other, not knowing what to say. Now, it's been quite a while since this experience, and I don't know, I could have very easily been drugged with my friend, but the fact that a lot of what we had seen matched up with each other, and the other fact that so many people had seen something in the sky that night exactly where we are, it just seems a little bit weird. It just doesn't feel right. I don't know. One of the main responsibilities I had working in my national park is to make sure that I survey the climate testing devices I'm not in the United States of America too, so it might be different out there, but we really put a lot of emphasis on to checking the air quality and trying to maintain it. We try and keep it to the highest possible standard that we can, and it's not really easy, but we have lots of trees, which is really a good thing. Now on this particular day, I set out to check the first 3 posts and they were fine. I go into the 4th and final one and it's starting to get dark. I can then see that there's a colleague who's already there, so I don't think much of it. I just continue doing my job and do a friendly wave, but I don't get one back. I turn around and go to do my other task, hoping that this person has done it for me, expecting them to catch up with me. I then realise that they look odd. Something about the way that they're standing hunched over just doesn't sit right with me. It doesn't look like somebody who's happy and healthy, it looks like somebody who's a little bit off. I don't know, just their whole demeanour seems really strange to me. I then shine my flashlight over thinking maybe they're in trouble, and I get the fright of my life. I'm met with something that is wearing an all dark robe, has a very weird goat kind of face and looks like what I can only describe as the devil, with completely black eyes. It's probably about 7 feet tall and slowly turns to face me. I drop the flashlight and within a moment I'm bolting the opposite direction. Eventually I make it back to the station and I frantically explain what's happened, and some of the other guys go to check it out. We can't find anything, just my flashlight and its dying light now because it's been out there in the cold for a while. We don't find a person or devil, but we do find something weird. There are hoof marks in the ground, exactly where I saw this thing. Weirdly, there's none leading away, just perfectly in the position that I saw this thing standing there. We never saw this thing again, but it actually is in our folklore to have things like this around, so I'm certain what I saw was probably the devil or some kind of demonic entity.